Some.
Can I welcome everyone to the second remote meeting of North Lanarkshire Council? Before we go to the business of the meeting, I would like to remind you of the functionality which will assist with the smooth running of the meeting. Unless you're speaking, can all members please ensure that your microphone is muted? If you have declared an interest in a particular item of business, the clerk will remove you from the meeting to the lobby and reinstate you once that item of business has been dealt with. Can I remind members that if you wish to declare an interest during the meeting, please type DEC in the chat bar and hit return. If you wish to raise a point of order, please type in the chat bar PO and hit return. If you wish to ask a question, please hit the space bar and the chat bar and then enter, and the clerk will notify me of the order of individual speakers at each item. Please do not use the chat bar for any other purposes. Colleagues, I would like to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed through the Council's YouTube channel and is publicly available. If the meeting needs to adjourn for any reason, the stream will stop and the new stream will commence when the meeting resumes. In addition, the meeting will be available afterwards as an archived recording. As this is the first time we are live streaming a remote meeting, it will also be recorded in the normal way as a precaution. Members, I would like to advise you that the Council is in receipt of a letter from Kate Forbes, Cabinet Secretary for Finance, that was only received this morning and impacts the report by the Head of Financial Solution in today's agenda, agenda item 3. Accordingly, this item will be withdrawn and will now not be considered today to provide officers with an opportunity to assess the implications of the new information. I would also like to advise you that the notice of motion listed agenda item 6 has been withdrawn and therefore will not be considered. Colleagues, I've agreed in terms of Standing Order 15 to accept additional item of business which I consider competent, relevant and urgent. A copy of this item was sent to members earlier today, and this will be taken immediately after agenda item 5. I have a note of apologies from Councillor Watson. Do we have any other apologies? Thank you very much. Agenda item 1 is declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in public life Scotland, Act 2000. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor, is that Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Provost. I'm a member of Scottish CND, but I understand that this doesn't preclude me from taking part in the vote.
Councillor Barclay. Councillor Barclay, you're still muted.
There we are. Sorry about that, Provost. I'll get the hang of this one day. The same is to declare that I'm a member of Scottish CND, but the monitoring officer has advised it shouldn't stop me voting.
Councillor Stubbs.
Agenda item 5, Provost, as a member of Scottish CND, I will be taking part in the debate and voting.
Councillor McManus.
A member of Scottish CND.
Councillor Damasio.
Agenda item 5 is a member of Scottish CND, but I'll still be taking part in the debate.
Councillor Fotheringham.
As a member of Scottish CND.
Councillor Weir.
A member of Scottish CND.
Councillor Cameron.
I declare I'm the council representative to Scores. I don't believe it precludes me taking part in the agenda item, the nuclear and agenda item.
Councillor Lennon.
Member of CND Provost, I intend to take part in item 5.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is minutes of meetings, committees,
Provost.
subcommittees and panels for cycle 3.
Provost, I believe Councillor Shields has also wishes to declare an interest.
Provost, I put mine in to declare interest in item 5 as a member of CND.
Sorry, Councillor Shields. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Agenda item 2, accordance with Standing Order 20, the volume of minutes has been distributed to you, including the policy and strategy minute of the 1st of October 2020 and the regulatory committee of 6th of October 2020. Can we approve the volume of minutes?
I didn't get them.
Agenda item 3, it was the updated 2020-21 revised financial forecast. As explained earlier, this item has been withdrawn. Agenda item 4, membership of committees, subcommittees, panels and outside bodies. Colleagues, the list of proposed amendments has been issued to you in advance of the meeting. Can we agree the proposed amendments?
Provost, Councillor Damasio's indicated he wishes to come in.
Councillor Damasio.
I would just like to comment that we did submit our amendments and they should have been circulated. I just want to highlight to officers something I hope they'll pick up immediately after this full council. Some of the larger committees, I think there's 3 of them. I can't remember the total number on the committee, but Labour are sitting with 17 on a number of them. It's particularly education, finance and resources and housing. And the Labour group, who have 1 member more, have on 1 committee, may seem appropriate, 1 member more, but on education and housing, they're sitting with 17, and the SNP group are sitting with 15, which doesn't seem appropriate. I would like officers to review that and in fact correct that for the next cycle.
Provost, I can assist if that helps.
You go, Andrew. Thank you.
I emailed business managers in July to advise that after a change of designation by 1 member from 1 group to become an independent member, there were some anomalies in the rounding up and rounding down of the political balance, and the email stated that it was a matter for council to determine. So no action was taken at the August council meeting. Obviously, no action has been taken at this council meeting, but I'll maybe remind business managers of the situation, and we can remedy it for future meetings.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Councillor Damasio, Andrew will send you out that information, and there can be a discussion between now and the next full council. We move on to the urgent item of business. As I indicated earlier, I've agreed to accept an additional item of business in accordance with Standing Order 15. A copy of the item was issued to elected members earlier today, and it is also available on Marge. Councillor London.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just advise members that following discussions, I'll be moving the motion, which is now amended, and Officer Andrew Rose has a copy of it, and it'll be seconded by Councillor Kelly, the Deputy Leader of the Council. So it's a composited motion. Andrew, I think you have a copy of that.
Yes, just bear with me. I'll just making the changes to the document.
Oh my God.
Right, I'll share that document now.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Provost. I'll make my comments then. Can I begin by welcoming the opportunity to, first of all, composite this motion alongside Councillor Kelly. It's an important motion for the people of North Lanarkshire. The item of urgent business today provides an opportunity for us as a council to outline the key temporary restrictions being introduced across North Lanarkshire from 6 p.m. on Friday, the 9th of October, for a period of 16 days. But crucially, will also provide reassurance to those in our communities, particularly those in the business community, including but not limited to the hospitality sector. Reassurance to them all that we are only too aware of the impact that those temporary and necessary public health restrictions will have, and reiterate the commitment of the Council to providing as much support as we can. Provost, I want to begin my substantive remarks by thanking the Director of Public Health from NHS Lanarkshire, Gabe Docherty, along with their own Chief Executive and Executive Director of Enterprise Communities, for taking the time to brief political leaders on Monday. That joint up partnership approach and clear communication is crucial to ensuring that we can do our role and communicate to the public the key messages in an ever-changing situation with this global pandemic. Provost, yesterday afternoon the First Minister outlined to Parliament a series of new temporary measures for Scotland, but crucially specific restrictions for Lanarkshire. A reminder for members and indeed those who are joining the live stream, the restrictions for Lanarkshire are: all licensed premises will be required to close with the exception of takeaway services. Cafes which don't have an alcohol licence will be able to open between 6 in the morning and 6 at night. No group exercise classes for indoor gyms and sports courts. Pools with an exemption for under 18s. No adult contact sports or training except professional sports, indoor or outdoor. No outdoor live events. The closure of snooker and pool halls, indoor bowling, casinos and bingo halls, and the minimised use of public transport for essential purposes only, as well as the rule of 6 from 2 households for outdoor meetings only, and people in Lanarkshire advised not to travel outside the health board area they live in unless essential or something is booked. As we can see from the evidence published by the National Clinical Directors and the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Nursing Officer, these restrictions are essential in reducing the prevalence and transmission of coronavirus in our communities. Actions we must take if we want to save lives and reduce the risk of this virus. Of course, the Scottish Government recognise these measures are difficult for all of us, but specifically we recognise it's a challenge for our business community, in particular the hospitality and leisure sectors. To support business, we've announced a £40 million fund, and in the coming days the Scottish Government will work with the affected sectors, especially hospitality, to ensure that that money provides the most help to those who need it. For the rest of this month, businesses can also use the UK Government's job retention scheme, and the Scottish Government will discuss with businesses how the support package can mitigate some or all of the employer's contribution to the UK job retention scheme. So I hope that in coming days, local businesses right across North Lanarkshire will get access to the support they crucially need. And turning to the actions outlined in the motion, it's clear that the Government urgently need more flexibility in funding to meet the immediate needs here in Scotland, particularly to support business who have been most affected. It will provide clarity in order to plan for the coming year, a crucial element in planning to tackle this virus. Therefore, we consider it an important step for local government's voice to join calls for additional financial support from government in order that we can best support those in our community. Turning to our own actions as a council to end, Provost, I wish to reiterate firstly the thanks of the group and indeed the council to Stephen Penman and his team for their work in communicating the key public health messages during this difficult time, and indeed the business support team for their crucial advice to concerned businesses throughout the last few months. Of course, in the coming few weeks, that communication will be ever more important, and I hope that in agreeing today's motion will continue to do just that. Indeed, the motion ends by agreeing that the Council's excellent business support team will continue their important work in supporting business at this difficult time, and I know that Yvonne Weir and her team, who have done incredible work in recent times, will continue to do so. Provost, in concluding, I want to end by paying tribute to our staff across the Council and indeed to those in public health for their incredible work in recent months against the most challenging of backdrops. And end with a message to those across North Lanarkshire. Let's stick with these restrictions, let's beat this virus together, and let's look forward to the brighter days that are ahead. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Provost. I think the details of everything substantial is in the compensate motion, and I think it's significant in terms of the restrictions being brought in, as George has said, that we all get behind these restrictions. It's unfortunate the way the virus is coming back and spreading amongst our communities, and we do have to work together, government, public health, NHS, both governments, UK and Scottish level, and council, to do everything we can to protect residents and support them. As for business support, a very critical part of this is making sure both the Scottish and UK governments are stepping into that environment right now. This is something we have to live with, but we also have to make sure that when we come out of it, we have businesses and employment in the area. And we know the council does a significant amount of work to generate local employment and opportunities, and we have to see that across every level. So it's important we write to both the Scottish and the UK governments regarding this matter to get the utmost clarity and support. And also I think we have to say that we use our own methods nationally through COSLA to make sure COSLA is also working with the Scottish Government regularly to get that kind of business support that's vital when we come into restrictive measures like we're seeing now. And lastly, absolutely pay tribute to the outstanding work of our own business teams within the council who during the first part of this were instrumental in supporting so many local businesses, and will continue to do so 24/7 to make sure we protect as many jobs as we can, while also making sure we adhere to the restrictions which are sadly necessary because of the way the COVID-19 virus is spreading. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. We've got an amendment from Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Provost. The further lockdown measures announced yesterday by the First Minister could be the final blow to many hospitality businesses throughout North Lanarkshire. As stated with the SNP Now joint Labour motion, many businesses will need to close their doors from 6 p.m. tomorrow until the 26th of October. This despite the majority of them spending thousands of pounds renovating their premises to adhere to the social distancing measures in place whilst we fight COVID-19. The hardship this would have caused to so many businesses is unprecedented. Businesses will have woken up this morning confused by the measures introduced by the First Minister. Others will be worrying about their future and the lack of support and communication provided to them by the Scottish Government. In short, the Scottish Government has not done enough to protect and support businesses and by extension their staff who have families to provide for. I find it hypocritical of the SNP group to bring forward this urgent item of business to ask the UK Government for more money when the Scottish Government has failed to keep its promise to businesses and the Scottish people. The growth scheme, launched in 2017, was to provide £500 million over 3 years. To date, it has only spent £258.9 million. This fund was introduced to support businesses and grow the economy. Many, including myself, are left wondering where the rest of that money has disappeared to. Once again, we find North Lanarkshire SNP bringing forward a motion to deflect attention away from the failings of the SNP government, which have occurred time and time again throughout this pandemic. Today, during First Minister's questions, Richard Leonard asked the First Minister why there has been a lack of consultation with trade unions and businesses before implementing these tough decisions. A one-day consultation after yesterday's announcement and just hours before businesses are forced to close their doors is just not good enough. Businesses deserve better. They need to know how much they can apply for, when they can apply for it, and how long they'll have to wait before support reaches them. Although the First Minister advised that the Scottish Government would provide more clarity on the allocated funding, it's too little too late. Businesses, particularly small independent businesses, have been left in the lurch. The Scottish Government has their own borrowing powers. They also have received £6.5 billion from the UK Government to help fight coronavirus in Scotland. And as I've mentioned before, Scottish Government ministers have failed to spend nearly half of their promised £500 million of the growth scheme. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, recently wrote to the First Minister following the UK Government's decisive action to protect livelihoods with its winter economy plan. This included a new job support scheme, extensions to loan repayments through a new pay-as-you-grow scheme, and extending the VAT cut on hospitality and tourism until March next year. He called on the Scottish Government to show similar ambition to support our economy, and I agree with him. Under devolution, it is the Scottish Government and local councils who are the first point of contact for many businesses. Therefore, this Conservative group would argue that it's the Finance Secretary who the leader of the council should be writing to find out where the missing money has gone. In addition, to find out what additional support the Scottish Government will give to businesses following the decision to introduce further COVID restrictions. I will now formally propose the amendment. Provost, thank you.
Councillor Wilson, I understand you're seconding this. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Provost. Restrictions are a massive blow to the hospitality and leisure sector, and they of course must be fully supported at this time. I'll say to the Nationalists that what they should be requesting is for the Scottish Government to treat businesses better, as they should have been consulted before yesterday's announcement. When making a statement to Parliament yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon said that funding would be made available, but there was no detail on how much of the package firms could apply for individually, when they would be able to apply, and when the financial aid would ultimately be with them. Here's what the Small Business Federation said on Wednesday. The bare minimum that those in business expect is for the Scottish Government to set out their new package of help at the same time as they detail any new restrictions. The First Minister didn't do this, even though throughout the COVID outbreak, the hospitality has adhered to all of the instructions they've been asked to follow. It's simply not good enough. When considering requests for financial aid, the SNP should start by looking at the £500 million growth scheme, half of which has been left unspent by their own government. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Mark, we'll get some speakers wanting in.
Yeah, Provost, there's a number of speakers that want to come in. We've got Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Carson, Councillor Cameron and Councillor Graham.
Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Provost. If I'm honest, I very much welcome that this motion was composited, and I think it's very important for everybody, for us, for our communities, that it was composited even, and you know that recognition of collegiate working across the political divides, as we all, you know, just recognise that we have to do what we can to stem the transmission of the virus. It's really unfortunate that we're here in the Central Belt and obviously we're experiencing more transmission and more prevalence of COVID than other parts of Scotland. What I would say is that one of the major criticisms of government, if we think back to March, was that perhaps they could have acted sooner, and this idea has been well debated and well spoken about, that maybe 2 or 3 weeks earlier moving into lockdown could have made all the difference. And so although these restrictions are very difficult for all of us, and nobody wants to see them, nobody wants to see, of course, businesses shut down and our economy damaged even further than it already is, I for one remain hopeful that taking the measures that we're taking now will have some kind of positive contribution towards the prevalence of this virus. I don't want to say too much about it, but I feel the need, given some of Megan and Nathan's comments, here in the Central Belt in Scotland, we're seeing 150 or so cases per 100,000. But if we look to parts of England in the north, to Liverpool, to Manchester, etc., we're seeing prevalence of in excess of 500 to 600 per 100,000 of the population. And so I find it a wee bit difficult and a wee bit unpalatable that we have to take lectures on governance here when it seems clear to everyone throughout the United Kingdom that the Prime Minister has lost control and has lost the authority and the trust of the people, and is looking to replicate certainly the measures that we've put in place here this week come Monday, and I look forward to seeing some consistent messaging from him. In relation to spend and to finances, I think that initial security from the furlough, of course, was very much welcomed throughout the country, and I think it's the single best thing that Boris has done, and Rishi has, as Chancellor, has done as Prime Minister. But of course, that security net has been pulled away from the people of Scotland without their input and without their say. And we're left at the last minute, locked out of discussions often to figure out what's going to happen next. And obviously the virus isn't going to wait for us to consult with trade unions and all the different stakeholders. And just pointing out that the First Minister offered that reassurance that finance would follow the restrictions. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Carson.
Thank you, Provost. As Councillor Larson said, this is a very important motion and I'm delighted to support it. Councillor Linden mentioned that this motion was not limited to hospitality, and I think we can all agree that the impact of the virus on businesses right across Scotland has been immeasurable, and the support put in place so far has been a lifeline for many of them. But I just want to pay tribute to the beauty industry, an industry that's made up primarily of women,
who have been heavily impacted by the virus and who continue to be impacted by this virus and the restrictions. And while restrictions are really important for tackling COVID, I think we can't forget that businesses like makeup artists, for example, are still suffering because of the necessary use of face masks. They've not been able to open since March. And for many of these women, that is their livelihood. So I don't think we should be forgetting that. I just hope that both the UK and the Scottish Government will keep them in mind going forward when they're making plans. As I said, I'm delighted to support this motion.
Thank you. I think we're starting to drift off. It's all about writing to to Westminster and to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance for money to support the businesses that have been closed down after the announcement yesterday, and that's what the crux of the motion and amendment is. So if we can try and keep to that. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Provost. I'm just going to say I was disappointed to see this motion come up, especially since the proposer of the motion said in black and white the other day that he would put forward a motion that was much more useful to our local community, and since he's failed to do that, that's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Provost. Briefly, that I would like to hear comments from Jordan and Paul about the business team. They are simply the best. And hopefully that comment doesn't cause any eruptions as it did previously. They are first class, one Weir's team. Excellent.
Mark, is there anybody else indicated they want in?
No further speakers have indicated they wish to come in, Provost.
Councillor Gallagher to sum up.
Thank you, Provost, and I will keep this brief. To summarise, businesses deserve respect, and the Scottish Government should have consulted them before implementing these measures. As I've said, the Scottish Government, alongside the Council, is the first point of contact. Therefore, including the vast underspend of the Growth Fund, it's why the Conservative Group believe that we should be writing to the Finance Secretary, Kate Forbes. Thank you.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you very much, Provost. To be honest, Provost, I don't know quite where to begin with the contributions I've heard from some members across the chamber. I think the best thing to do would be to begin with, thankfully, the very positive, collegiate commentary that we've heard from members who recognise that this motion is fundamentally about support for business against the backdrop of a global health pandemic. So thanks to Councillors Allen and Larson and Carson for their commentary, which was, and indeed to Councillor Kelly, which totally understood exactly where the motion was coming from. I would simply say to my opposition colleagues, Ireland, Belgium, France, Germany. No, it's not my travel list for when this is all over. They are the countries at present who are currently undertaking similar action in the hospitality and leisure sectors because of the prevalence of this virus. It knows no borders, it knows no boundaries. We are having to take some of the most difficult decisions ever. Any one of us would not relish the role that the First Minister has to take decisions to fundamentally alter people's lives. So this notion, frankly, that Douglas Ross is going to come in and be our saviour, it beggars belief to hear such startling contributions. Our focus rightly should be, and my focus of the rest of these comments is going to be responding to a public health crisis, because they totally and utterly missed the mark. It was about business support in North Lanarkshire. It was about communicating on the restrictions and the need to comply in North Lanarkshire. It was about writing to get more funds from all governments for North Lanarkshire. And instead, we saw a tribal, partisan, blindsided attack from Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Cameron. It was startling and frankly saddening. We know that engagement is taking place right now with the sector. Hospitality and leisure are engaging with the First Minister as we speak. I see her commitment to engaging with pubs in particular, and tomorrow she will outline how that £40 million will get to business, and it supplements our extensive already present package of support. So this notion that we are somehow throwing a business or throwing a sector to the wolves is ludicrous. It is utterly ludicrous. And Councillor Gallagher, I see, sits and says we are. Well, I would ask this. If she or any other member were in the position of the First Minister, where you saw rising rates of the virus, where your public health director, your national clinical director, your chief nursing officer, your chief medical officer are telling you that we are having exponential growth of 7% each day and could reach March rates of the virus by the end of the month, what would you do? Would you say, let's pause, let's take a week, let's have a look? Or would you take urgent, immediate action to rectify these ongoing issues, to bring the prevalence of the virus down, to save lives, to keep people and communities safe? I know what I would do, and it's a challenge to the Conservative colleagues to consider the vein in which they've approached this issue. It is a matter of public health, and that's why there is unity right across the two political parties, the two main parties in this council today. Because it is about public health, about saving lives, and about complying with the restrictions that are in place so that brighter days can be not too far away. Thank you, Provost.
Andrew, can I hand you over to you for the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Provost. The vote will be by roll call. I'll call each member's name out in turn, and if you could indicate if you wish to support the motion by Councillor Linden, the amendment by Councillor Gallagher, or if you wish to abstain. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Dinesh Ashraf. Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Voting for the motion.
Motion. Councillor Junaid Ashraf. Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barclay.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge.
Motion.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess. Councillor Burgess. Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Carragher.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Motion.
Councillor Castles.
Motion.
Councillor Michael Coyle. Councillor Michael Coyle. Councillor Motion, thank you. Councillor Sophia Coyle, I don't think is on the call.
Motion, I'm here.
Motion, you are, sorry.
I managed to log on eventually.
Councillor Cullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Curry. Was that amendment, Councillor Curry?
Yeah, amendment, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Damasio.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Andrew, could you hold on a minute? There's a point of order. Councillor Gallagher come in.
Thanks, Provost. There's someone who's unmiked themselves and they keep on shouting motion. Now that could actually impact the vote, so can we make sure that everyone's on mute, please? Thank you.
That's why we put an extra host on today, and Claire Louise is on helping out as well, so that we can keep an eye that that's happening. Thanks very much for that. Andrew, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy.
Motion.
Councillor Fannin.
Motion.
Councillor Farouk.
Motion.
Councillor Feeney.
Motion.
Councillor Fisher.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Gurley. Councillor Gurley. Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion.
Councillor Hume.
Motion.
Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Larson.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon. Sorry, can you repeat that, please, Councillor Lennon?
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Linden.
Motion.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor McGregor. Councillor McGowan.
Motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor McKendrick. Councillor McKendrick. Councillor McLaren, I don't think he's on the call.
Abstain. That's me just got connected. I never heard
Okay.
any of the debate, so I'll
Okay.
abstain.
Thank you. Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNally.
Motion.
Councillor McNeil.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Mooney.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Pettigrew.
Motion.
Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Reddin.
Motion.
Councillor Rorty.
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin.
Motion.
Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stephen. Councillor Stephen. No, Councillor Stevenson.
Motion.
Councillor Stocks.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Alan Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Annette Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Weir.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
Motion.
And I believe Councillor Junaid Ashraf is back on the call. If you'd like to advise your vote, please.
Motion.
Motion. Thank you very
Andrew,
much.
thank you.
I believe there's a point of order before I.
Yeah.
Councillor Damasio, point of order.
Hi there. It was just to point out that you just covered Councillor Junaid Ashraf there. It was just to point out that two of our councillors had issues with the sound. So we managed to get Councillor Junaid Ashraf there. Councillor McGregor was having difficulty with the sound as well. I wonder if you could see if you can get him back on at the moment.
Councillor McGregor on the call. If you could you indicate your vote, please?
He can I just add, Andrew, he has commented in the chat bar that he's having issues with his sound, and he's indicated how he wishes to vote also.
I can see that now. I'll accept that as a motion. In that, so the result is for.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Stephen was having difficulties as well. She did indicate that she wanted to vote for the motion, but there was no sound. She's indicated on the chat bar that she wishes to vote for the motion.
Thank you very much. The The vote is for the amendment 7 votes, for the motion 60 votes, and there was 1 abstention, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Can I remind people to make sure their microphones are mute when they're not speaking? During the voting and during the kind of end of the debate, there was quite a lot of feedback as though people's microphones were off. Andrew and Mark are trying to keep an eye and make sure people's mics are on, but it's up to us. I know they're very sensitive sometimes when they touch them, but try and keep an eye that you're on mute, and it means that we've got through the meeting quicker without any feedback. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which...
Provost, we've got a point order, sorry, from Councillor Linden.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you very much, Provost. Provost, you'll be aware that we lodged an item of urgent business, which you deemed not to be urgent. We consider it to be a matter that is of importance to the people of North Lanarkshire, and accordingly, we would be moving suspension of standing orders in order to allow us to debate it this afternoon.
Can I hand it over to Councillor, over the monitoring officer, Archie Aitken. Archie.
Thanks, Provost. I'm afraid, Councillor Linden, such a motion would not be competent because there's a statutory prohibition on any business being considered today that hasn't either been passed in terms of the standing orders by way of being considered urgent by the Chair, or is required by statute to be so considered. So I'm afraid I can give you the statutory reference if you want. It's paragraph 2 of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. So my position is that Council is not in a position today to consider a motion to suspend standing orders.
Actually, can I just seek further clarification through you, Chair? I'm not entirely clear what you're making reference to. The notice has been given that this is a remote meeting of the Council. Members are gathered. There is certainly the function for us to move suspension of standing orders. Are you informing me that that is not possible for councillors to suspend the standing orders of the Council at this moment in time, not to move to a vote, and then therefore not to consider business as it sees fit?
What I'm saying to you, Councillor Linden, is that specifically with regard to an urgent item of business, that the legislation prohibits that.
So for clarity, Archie, if you don't mind, I don't want to get into a set two over this with you. I want to clarify that if members take the decision, first of all, to suspend standing orders of the Council, are they then prohibited from considering the item which you have previously saw sight of, which would call on Culture and Leisure North Lanarkshire to produce a report on recovery against the of coronavirus? Is that the advice that you're giving, that members are A, not able to suspend the standing orders, and B, accordingly, therefore not able to consider the matter that you are aware of as are other members?
Okay, would it help, Councillor, if I read out the provision as opposed to summarising it?
No, I don't think that would help. I think just a clear answer to the question.
Okay. So a clear answer to the question is members are not prevented from seeking to suspend standing orders. However, if the intention to suspend standing orders is to bring in an item of urgent business which has already been considered by the Provost in terms of the standing orders, then that's not competent, as it's in contravention of the statutory provision that I've just mentioned to you.
So just very finally then, Chair, if we suspend standing orders and an item with similar wording, but not exactly the same wording as the Provost has already considered, was submitted by members, are you therefore saying that that's not competent?
Okay, so for an item of business to be considered today, which hasn't featured on the summons, that item must be considered in terms of the standing orders as to whether or not it's urgent.
Provost,
just to be clear, our standing orders also put a requirement of relevancy and competency. That's not mentioned in the legislation. The legislation talks about an item of urgent business that's been considered in terms of the standing orders.
Promise, thank you, and thank you to the monitoring officer. I won't force the issue because clearly we are going to be prohibited from discussing the issue of the recovery report on culture and leisure which we're seeking, and I think that is a disappointing position for us to be in as elected members, and I think my comments are noted. Provost.
That's not a point of order. You can take your issues up the monitoring officer online. Councillor Stubbs, you've said ask for a point of order.
Well, I'd be looking for some clarity on that, on that legislation. I think Archie mentioned was 1973. I've been a councillor since 2017, sometime after 1973, and on numerous occasions we have had motions to suspend standing orders for business that you have rejected as urgent business or other business, and this has never come up before. Is this a situation that's unique to virtual meetings? I doubt very much in 1973 that was factored into the Local Government Act. I'd be looking for further clarification.
The monitoring officer.
Apologies, Provost, just if I can finish my point.
Councillor Stubbs, that is not a point of order.
It is a point of order.
It's
a question on the standing orders. I'm looking for clarification. Why is it that on numerous occasions up to now we've been able to do this, but we are not able to do it today? What has changed?
Thanks, Provost. I have to say I'm struggling to think of numerous occasions when this has come up before. Perhaps Councillor Stubbs can assist, but I really don't have a recollection of a matter of urgent business which you ruled, Provost, or indeed your predecessor ruled as not being urgent, then being the subject of discussion at Council by way of a suspension of the standing orders. Councillor Stubbs is quite correct. We weren't considering, or those who drafted this legislation weren't considering remote meetings, so it's certainly not peculiar to the situation we find ourselves in. But the bottom line is, whether it's not arisen before or not, it is what's stated in the legislation. The legislation obviously supersedes the standing orders, and so I'm not in a position where I can advise members that it's competent to do so.
Thank you very much. We've heard what the monitoring officer said. There are a couple of people have asked to come in, but I'm not letting anybody else in this subject. I will ask Archie to put a full guidance out on this following this meeting so that people have it for future reference. Can we move on to agenda item 5, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Dinesh Ashraf, seconded by Councillor Masterton. Councillor Ashraf.
Thank you, Provost. Speaks to the reasoning and reflects the sentiment in our ward of many across Northland Council regarding nuclear weapons. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan were the single deadliest weapons in all of human history and remain so till today. Beyond killing many, the atomic bombs caused massive destruction in both cities, with over 90% near total destruction by them, including the obliteration of children, cannot and will not ever be justified in any war. And therefore, we are disappointed to see the amendment put forward today by the Conservative benches. I invite them to make their case that this can be justified to the people of North Lanarkshire. There are many reasons why, instead of spending inordinate amounts of money on weaponry, we could be using this to fund an incredible amount of good for the citizens of this country, bettering it and raising the standards of living for our citizens for a better life. With Trident costing up to 140 billion to renew, this needs to be considered, given how often we have spoken about funding in this chamber and why we'd like to do something but have not been able to. When a government has its priorities correct and serving people, expends money to fund a weapon that will never impact people's lives, we can do so much more. Regarding comments made in the press to the right of residents in North Lanarkshire Council to have their concerns raised in this chamber, virtual or otherwise, these concerns need to be taken seriously and addressed by those who have given us the privilege of representing them and our communities in this chamber. Please support this motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Thank you, Provost. Dan has covered many of the main points well, so I'll just add a few additional points of my own. This motion was actually brought to Danish and myself by the Justice and Peace Group of Holy Cross Parish Church in Croy. This is an issue which I believe there is a moral imperative to take a stance on, and the motion simply asks the Council to note the important anniversary this year of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, recognises the need to create a world free of nuclear weapons, and adds its voice to the call for the UK government to work for global nuclear disarmament and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. In Scotland, East Ayrshire, Fife, Edinburgh, Western Bartonshire and Renfrewshire councils have all recently passed similar motions. I'm aware that North Lanarkshire Council for some time now has also been a member of nuclear-free local authorities, so this motion would seem to fit in well to the Council's current commitments in that respect. I find the Labour amendment disingenuous and extreme. It also appears to be an entirely separate motion rather than an amendment to the motion as submitted by myself and Danish. I don't see anywhere in our original motion where it states that there is any expectation that this motion would cost the Council money, or that somehow by passing this motion, the Council's local priorities would cease to be building new homes, tackling poverty and inequality, growing our local economy and protecting jobs. All the budgetary strategies in the world are for naught in the face of nuclear accident or incident. I would suggest that there aren't many issues that would affect all of our constituents in the scale of nuclear weaponry. The other Scottish local authorities I mentioned are subject to the same fiscal restraints as North Lanarkshire Council, yet can still see the bigger picture. There's no cost to the Council on taking this initiative, but the cost to constituents in the name of Trident is incalculable. Thank you.
The First Amendment was Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Over half a century, Kingdom of National Defence. Every week, every hour, every day, our nuclear defence capability serves to protect this country and its people by deterring the most extreme forms of aggression against Britain. The key subject was the treaty and the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and it wasn't touched on in the speeches by the SNP members, which I thought was a little bit surprising. So I'll address it directly and say why the Council shouldn't support this treaty. The UK, alongside the other declared nuclear weapons countries, the United States, China, France and Russia, have made clear they're not going to sign this treaty. They made a decision because the treaty fails to address the key issues that must be overcome if we are ever to achieve a lasting nuclear disarmament. This is for a number of reasons. Quite frankly, it provides zero solutions to the complex and unpredictable international security environment. Thirdly, it safeguards and it limits nuclear demands of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Over 50 years ago, the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons was formulated. Establishing this treaty has proved to be one of the key does is contradict and potentially undermine the NPT, which is efforts of NPT. I can't stress the point enough that Britain's nuclear deterrence remains just as critical to our national security as it was capable of the World War. Actually, potential threats from existing nuclear states and enemy actors who maybe are trying to acquire nuclear weapons by dismantling Trident in a reckless act of unilateral disarmament. The reality is that the main cause of giving up on nuclear weapons is safe and unable to deter the most extreme forms of aggression. In what is an increasingly uncertain world, we cannot be certain that a future nuclear threat to Britain will not emerge over the coming decades. Therefore, it would be a massively irresponsible decision for the UK to discard our current ability to deter such potential threats to our way of life. It's important to note that maintaining Trident is not just a matter of critical importance for our own national security, but it is also vital for protecting our NATO allies of NATO that the hypocrisy of the SNP nuclear weapons is exposed. At their conference in October 2012, SNP members voted in favour of a separate Scotland staying part of NATO in the event that they succeeded in breaking up the UK, and this remains the party's policy today. But and where NATO stands on the issue of nuclear weapons, let me read a short extract from the supranational organisation's website. Nuclear weapons are a core component of all capability and defence. NATO is committed to arms control, disarmament and non-proliferation, but as long as nuclear weapons despite the SNP also want us to be members of NATO, despite the fact that at its core it is a nuclear-based alliance. It is a completely inconsistent position. Dissenting voices at the time of the 2012 vote claimed that once the party adopted its support for NATO, the SNP would be unable to ever fulfil its goal.
1 minute.
There's just one final point I want to focus on before I conclude, and that is the UK, as a responsible holder of nuclear weapons, of the nuclear weapon states declared 1% of the world's nuclear stockpiles. Britain's nuclear capability has been cut back by more than half from its Cold War high. The UK is the UK government is committed to the long-term goal of a nuclear-free world and will continue to play a leading role in efforts at multilateral nuclear disarmament.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Provost. As we approach the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it is right that we remember the bombings. After all, these events are part of our world's history, which resulted in a significant loss of life. However, I have concerns regarding this motion as there are inaccuracies. Although Trident acts as a deterrent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, it has also provided over 15,000 jobs in the Helensburgh and Coolport area. I'll get more into that point later. I first want to point out that even in the unlikely scenario that this motion passes today, it will not overturn a decision that was made by MPs in 2016 to renew Trident, nor will it form any part of further renewal objections. We are councillors, not MPs. The treaty highlighted in the motion is signed by 84 countries throughout the world. Out of that 84, only 46 have ratified the treaty. So when SNP councillors mention global majority of countries, what do they mean by this? Or is it simply the case that SNP councillors need a refresher class in geography, as there are 193 countries in the world? Provost, this motion is perhaps being confused with the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which, unlike the one mentioned in the motion, is actually in force. As I mentioned previously, Trident protects the United Kingdom. To surrender the UK's own access to nuclear weapons unilaterally would be to relinquish the country's seat at the international table, where we contribute towards the most serious foreign policy decisions made around the world. This motion is yet another cynical, albeit predictable, attempt at Britain bashing from an SNP group who continue to act as a parody of their Holyrood counterparts. The United Kingdom is a ratifier of the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. From a weapons stockpile of well over 750 warheads at the peak of the Cold War, the United Kingdom is firmly committed to a reduction in numbers, now down below 250. Now, if this motion was really about nuclear disarmament, we'd be talking about the realistic steps that could be taken as part of the global community to continue the good work that's been carried out by the UK and other nuclear powers. I am, of course, talking about using the soft power of the nuclear nations to ensure countries such as India, Israel and Pakistan finally sign the NPT. Or perhaps we could talk about how the People's Republic of China has breached the NPT by supplying uranium to countries that have not signed the aforementioned treaty. But instead, we've got this performance today. The sad yet brutal reality of this situation is that technology, however much we want it to be, cannot be undiscovered. Unilateral disarmament is a pie-in-the-sky thinking that, quite frankly, is a waste of time. Global multilateral disarmament, however, is marginally more realistic. Before I finish, Provost, I do want to mention Helensburgh and Coolport. The SNP, if they vote for this motion today, are voting to devastate these areas. There is a reason why Jackie Baillie MSP is re-elected time and time again, because she stands up for her constituents and she listens to the trade union GMB who fight to protect these jobs. Who are we to determine the livelihoods of people who work at HMMB Clyde, more commonly known as Faz Lane? Who are we to turn our backs on the people and businesses which are supported by Trident? If the SNP knew the history of Scotland, they would understand the destruction a move like this would cause. In 1992, the US Navy formally pulled out of the Holy Loch, ending a 31-year presence of the US Navy in that area. This move devastated the local community in terms of jobs, livelihoods, communities, and even families. What the SNP are asking us to agree on would eclipse the withdrawal of the US forces in the area to a much higher magnitude. The SNP have shown themselves up to date, Provost. They don't care about submitting an accurate motion, and they certainly do not care about the jobs and livelihoods here in Scotland. I will now formally second this amendment.
Thank you very much. We've got a second amendment from Councillor Logue and Councillor Kelly. Councillor Logue.
Thanks very much, Provost. Can I say at the outset that the contents and words of this amendment will be the standard amendment the administration will submit to any motions similar to this one. My personal views on the futility and absurdity of moving motions which have no direct statutory responsibility for individual councils has been well covered and clearly contributes to generate a reaction. I fully accept in a global society every issue has a relevance, but the overriding focus of such should be analysed, scrutinised, challenged, and where necessary, amended by a relevant decision-making body. This clearly is not the case with motions of this nature. I have been a member of North Lanarkshire Council since its inception in 1995, and the submission of motions we are now being asked to discuss is a relatively new concept which has developed over the last 7 or 8 years. On reflection, there are probably two reasons for this. One is to use up allocated time and create a diversion or distraction from considering crucial council-related issues or challenges. It is utterly bizarre and incredulous that at a time when this council faces unprecedented challenges due to decreasing year-on-year funding from central government amounting to £31 million in this financial year and a projected £22 million in the next financial year, along with the increasing cost of meeting COVID challenges, that we have the time to indulge in what really is a virtue signalling motion, which we have no impact or influence in addressing the genuine and relevant substantive issues raised with the motion. None of us were elected to highlight issues such as independence for Catalonia or nuclear disarmament. We were all, and I say collectively all, elected on the same commitment to provide quality local services, to meet local needs and to challenge the body politic of the council to achieve this. I think it is time that we refocus our energies and attention on such, and also to debate the challenges we face, as were outlined this week in an excellent meeting of the Local Government Committee in the Scottish Parliament. Issues such as the decreasing funds for local government, the greater reliance on service charge increase, focus on our anti-poverty strategies. Let us focus on our educational attainment figures. Let us focus on our house building programs.
Sorry to interrupt, Provost. There's a point of order being made.
Let us focus on our school estate plans.
There's a point of order.
Order, Councillor Carragher. Carragher, you've made a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's point of order 43, where when speeches are being made, you must speak to the content of the motions. I believe Councillor Logue strayed sorry?
The order amendment to the motion.
I believe that, well, the motion was not about funding, and I think Councillor Logue has strayed into that.
Well, the amendment by Councillor Logue's about what, as a council, we should be delivering and how we should be delivering it. So let Councillor Logue finish.
Clearly, I mean, the interruption was to interrupt the flow of the contribution. And as I was saying, we should be reviewing our focus on a whole range of local issues. Issues such as our strategy for growing the local economy. Issues such as the challenges facing the integrated joint board. The focus on the city deal. Is if are elected members comfortable with the current delivery model of the city deal or our current partnership arrangements? Are members comfortable with the arrangements we have with our partner? Or perhaps the biggest elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. It's an issue which has been around for 13 years, and we were told then it was no longer fit for purpose, and that is the financing of local government from council tax.
Convener, there's another point of order being
Why
made.
are we not discussing these issues?
So, Councillor Logue, there's another point of order.
I think there'll be a third one coming very soon as well, right?
Councillor Ashraf.
Thanks for bringing me in. I just wanted to re-raise the point of order that was raised in that this is nothing to do with the substance of the motion, and Councillor Logue has gone on for almost 3 minutes on a topic absolutely nothing to do with the substance of the motion or what our constituents have raised with us. He's talking about the new city deal, about meetings at Holyrood. I think, Provost, I would urge you to reconsider when continuing on this topic.
If you read the amendment from Councillor Lowe, he's keeping quite to the topic of the amendment that he made. Councillor Lowe.
If you look across the faces of the chamber, I think you'll find you're in a minority there.
Okay.
Councillor Ashraf, I'll chair the meeting. Councillor Lowe.
Go back to the point I was making. I honestly believe that motions of this nature are used to indulge in avoidance and distraction techniques. However, there may be another reason for this, and this is a much more cynical reason, and this has been articulated to me by several members of the council, and not only in the administration, but across the different groups in the council, and that is that invariably we now have a small number of members moving and seconding motions.
1 minute.
Clearly wish to grandstand, to heighten their own political profile, possibly to achieve their parliamentary ambitions. If that were to be the
that
case,
is really straying a bit off the track. That's straying a bit. If you could get back on what an amendment is.
I'm only
Maybe strained, but it's true.
That has been postulated to me. I'm not saying it's true. It's been postulated to me. If that were to be the case, I think it's a complete misuse of their position as an elected local councillor with distinctive responsibility of delivering and improving local services.
Provost, there is another point of order. The Councillor Carricker, apologies.
I believe it's now time to cease this practice.
Councillor Lowe, Councillor Carricker's come in again.
I've got a
I believe the order is 55, and I'd refer them to the Councillors' Code of Conduct. I think he's been disrespectful to members within this council. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. No, he's been disrespectful. He's just not up there. He's continued, Provost. He did continue, and can I just ask a question, please?
No, this isn't a question and answer session.
The amendment is not relevant to the motion. The amendment's not relevant to the motion. I don't understand how it's competent.
It's relevant to most of the
content. Because the motion's not relevant to council.
Amendment. Councillor Damasio, a point of order. This is ridiculous.
Provost, can we have no interruption from other members? There's a bit of heckling going on, I think, from Councillor Morgan.
That's right, it is me, because the motion's not relevant to council.
Councillor, I think
Councillor Morgan is not relevant to this discussion right now, given that he's not been called in.
Provost, I wonder if I might...
Always on standby.
I'm chairing the meeting. Can everybody get their microphone on mute? I will tell the speakers when they come in. Councillor Damasio, you've got a point of order, and then I'll let Councillor Logue back in.
I lost my signal a little bit there, but I think Councillor Linden mentioned that we had someone heckling or cheering Jim on constantly there.
Well,
I would also, that is my main point.
That's no point of order.
That isn't my point of order. That is not my point of order. Okay. No, I would like to reiterate what's actually already been said, but just supplementary to that,
No, there's no
Councillor
supplementary.
Councillor Logue was warned that he had absolutely strayed
Can
off the
somebody,
point.
Councillor
It
Damasio's
was
mic
almost
off there
personal.
corner, please?
It was almost personal attacks
Can
on
somebody,
fellow
Councillor
individuals without.
Your microphone's been put off. Councillor Lowe, can you finish? No indication to what you think of people's political aspirations, because that is not part of what is written in your amendment.
I sincerely hope the members read the briefing that came out from Archie Aiken on the 15th of September in relation to item Standing Order 46 about abusing Standing Order 46 to interrupt speakers, because what I have seen over the last 5 minutes has clearly been an abuse of Standing Order 46. Can I say that never have I had a cheerleader? I'd be happy if I had cheerleaders, but I've never been in that situation. And I'd finish up by saying that I now genuinely believe it's time we cease the practice of grandstanding with motions which have no direct council.
Pardon?
There's another point of order, Provost, from Councillor Damasio.
Right, Councillor Damasio, what's your point of order?
A point of order seems is that Councillor Provost, and he seems to be raising a point of order in terms of members' conduct instead of continuing.
He's reminding people of what happened. In fact, see, at this point, can I bring...
We're not here to be lectured by the Leader of the Council. Could you please address his motion?
I'm bringing the monitoring officer in to remind people of what was sent out to them. Archie, can you remind people what you sent out to them earlier?
Certainly, Provost. I did express a couple of weeks ago in an email to all elected members my concerns that what was being fed back to me from certain committees, and indeed what I was witnessing myself, either at committee or indeed full council, was verging in some cases on a misuse of the point of order procedure. Can I also say, Provost, sorry, I tried to come in before to seek to assist, so perhaps just to throw in my tuppence worth to members in terms of the competency and relevancy of the motion and the amendment that's being discussed at the moment. Members are aware that Standing Order 25 requires every motion considered by Council to be relevant to the context of North Lanarkshire. And clearly, Provost, you have considered when that motion was first submitted that indeed it is relevant to the context of North Lanarkshire. So clearly, an amendment which is defined in the standing orders at Standing Order 29 requires to be a counter proposition to the motion. And so my view in terms of the relevancy both of the motion and of the amendment is that both pass that test. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Lowe, can you finish up?
I'll gladly finish up. Can I say that my contribution today has been to amplify the point and the context and contents of the amendment which was put forward, and I believe that it successfully has achieved that. I finish up by saying I now think it's time that we cease the practice that we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years, that we focus genuinely on motions which will improve and maximise the life opportunities for residents in North Lanarkshire. And I think that should be the genuine, general motivation for any motion or any amendment which comes to the Chamber of Council. I so move the amendment.
Councillor Linden, I see your comment. Every time
it was an accident, Provost. I meant to send it to somebody directly. I apologise.
Well, what I was going to say, and I've seen your gesture as well, anytime somebody gets interrupted, their time is stopped and restarted. And Andrew is diligent at that and has always been diligent at making sure that
I have no doubt, Provost.
100% accurate. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Provost. I'm going to be very brief. I totally echo everything the leader said, and it is really disappointing that there's been an attempt to disrupt them. You might not like what someone's saying, but you don't need to go down the route of using point of orders to disrupt them, and that is clearly what's happening. Nuclear weapons, really important issue, very important issue. When I'm with people, I talk about it in the discussion and debate, but it's not a council issue. And I think, Councillor Masterton, when groups like the Justice of Peace group come to you maybe you should be more honest and say, look, as councillors, we don't have a remit over this. You should go to your MP or your MSP, take it up with them so we can take it up with the relevant place where it should be debated, and absolutely should be debated, and we should all feed into MPs, MSPs on such important issues. Jim has summarised something I think is really important. If you're a member of the public watching us today, you'll actually be stunned. The public pay our wages. They pay our wages to deal with issues that really matter to this council. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We were just talking earlier about how important it is that we work on that issue, protect our residents. That will be the focus of residents in North Lanarkshire, not nuclear weapons right now. And it is slightly shameful that we're going down the route of having a lengthy debate, and that's why I'll keep my comments short on this issue, when we've got so many more very, very important issues, equally as important issues right now to deal with the pandemic, with COVID, and as Jim said rightfully, with things like funding for local government, where they've been underfunded for a very long time, for the last 13 years. We're still struggling to get funding for the COVID response, and these are critical matters to our residents. As we talked about businesses, we talked about how we tackle COVID. These are the issues that matter to the public. They're the things they want us to be focused on right now, and we should listen to them and do that.
Mark, I see the speakers dotted through these point of orders. Can you just clarify who it is?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Provost, just looking at the speakers that want to come in, we've got Councillor Burgess, Councillor T. Johnson and Councillor Linden.
Right. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Provost. Colleagues, the motion submitted by Councillors Ashraff and Masterson is nothing more than an attack on the British government and the security of the United Kingdom's peoples. It is indeed 75 years since the atomic bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 120,000 people died in that bombing, and basically it had to happen. The bombings ended the war something like 3 or 4 months earlier, and that was the reason for the bombing. But the parts of the motion which we can agree to, and who wouldn't? The Russians are frequent visitors to our territorial waters, our airspace. We're having our illustrious councillors notice that. And without the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force on alert day and night, who knows what might happen? We would be left naked against people like Kim Jong-un, who has already tossed missiles recklessly over Japan. He has threatened the United States of America, whose cities are supposed to be within reach of his ballistic missiles. India and Pakistan, two of the close democratic neighbours, who at this moment in time are killing each other over a Khyber Pass. Who's to say that one day one of these powers may drop a bomb on the Khyber Pass? Colleagues, the two cities in the both cities have roughly 500 bombs between them. The most densely populated area in the world would be wiped out. Why don't they sign the treaty? America, China, Russia, France, Israel, and the loose cannon is North Korea all have capabilities to bomb almost anywhere in the world. And what about the Middle East? They are countries who are just beginning to get onto the nuclear ladder. And we all know what their ruthless policies are like. Colleagues, no one in their right mind wants these horrible weapons of mass destruction. But we must hold the line when it comes to protecting the United Kingdom against any would-be lunatic who would mean us harm. That, my friends, is why we must retain our Trident fleet and for the foreseeable future. I support this amendment. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Provost. Just I want to point out a couple of things. We're told that there are other vital things that the council has got to get on to, but the bulk of this council meeting directly associated with council matters will last about an hour, and there are 4 council meetings a year. So let's get this into scale. I think Councillor Logue is talking about a council that meets about 4 hours a year in full council. Second thing I'd like to point out is that the council currently pay £3,000 a year as members of the nuclear free zones. And from what I see from the Labour motion, they seem to be wanting to stop that. Could they clarify whether they're going to continue paying £3,000 a year for the nuclear-free zones, or whether the implications of Councillor Logue's motion is that this has got to stop?
I'm sure Councillor Logue's taking a note of that, and I'll give you that in the summing up. Councillor London.
Thanks, Provost. Can I begin by welcoming the opportunity to comment on the debate and congratulate Councillors Ashraf and Masterton for bringing it to Council. It is welcome to hear elected members who have reflected on the wishes of local people and then bring that issue to the attention of other members across the chamber. Indeed, far from it being an issue which some may say we shouldn't be talking about in this place, we know that that's wrong, and that as a signatory to the Nuclear Free Local Authorities Group, we should take very seriously our obligations accordingly. On the substance of the motion, I simply want to get my continuing support for the removal of weapons of mass destruction from the banks of the Clyde, not too far from here, and hope instead the day will come in the not too distant future when we can rid ourselves and our waters of these weapons once and for all, and instead focus on spending our resource on the communities we all represent and on the services that matter to them, rather than the upkeep of weapons which we could never use. The notion that we could take the lives of millions of innocent people with the press of a button should abhor each and every one of us in the chamber, and indeed across the country. Our values should be about compassion, kindness and love, and I look forward to the day when those are the values that underpin our approach to defence. Turning now to the amendments, and not entirely sure where to start following what I've heard. Firstly, the amendment by Councillor Logue. Provost, I want to highlight a few issues to the Leader. The Leader said a few times that he thinks that we're trying to obfuscate and avoid talking about other issues. But I look at the agenda today. Any motions on these big important issues that the Leader has highlighted, the city deal, education, not a peep, because the Leader wants to get these meetings done and dusted as quick as possible, and we all know it, and he's fooling nobody. Indeed, I've noted 3 occasions when the Leader stated that he thinks it's time to end the grandstanding. The irony of listening to that commentary as the Leader does the very same to members, lecturing us about what we should or should not bring up in this chamber. And more substantially, Provost, I think it's very interesting to hear the critique that we are not wanting to bring up local issues and issues of importance to the people of North Lanarkshire. We just had a protracted debate about the fact that Culture and Leisure Services was rejected as a motion today, an issue of importance to local people. But it was rejected by the Provost and clearly not something that the administration want to talk about. So I will take no lectures from the Leader. Provost, I know you don't like that point, but it's an important point, Provost. It's an important point.
Councillor London, I take objection to the way you spoke about me there.
Well, Provost, I don't think
I use my non-political role to make a ruling in that.
That's fine.
When I make rulings, they're on a non-political basis.
I don't think.
And I will get the monitoring officers to verify that if you wish.
I don't think I accused you of being political in that, Provost. I just thought your choice was
you were verging on it. I'm just pulling you up.
Well, I'm assuming that I'll be getting the time back, Provost, because I can disagree with your decision and not accuse you of being political about it. So
you will get the time back. Andrew stops the time every time.
Thank you very much, Provost. Thanks for the interruption. More substantially, I read with interest the Leader's comments to the press about the need to focus on local issues and the fact he believed we didn't do that. So I took some time to look through the motions since 2017, and I thank the officers for their help, because I look at our record versus the other groups. Number of SNP motions since 2017 to now, 67. Labour, 24. Almost a 3-to-1 ratio. This SNP group are being heard, taking on board the issues that matter to local people and standing up to ensure their voices are heard. We hear the Leader talking about taking up valuable time. His group can lodge motions to issues that they consider important. They have no interest in doing this. Nothing on the agenda from Labour today. We hear him saying that we need to focus on local issues that his administration are focusing on. The plan for North Lanarkshire, the place to live, learn, work, invest and visit, and focus on housing, for example. And he might want to make cheap partisan points in the motion so that he can get a poor headline in the press, but he is fooling no one. We talk about local issues all the time. On housing, the SNP government have billed 87,000, 60,000 for social rent, £1.7 million over the last Parliament on housing. So this authority has benefited from Scottish Government funding to build houses. Of course, house building isn't Labour's strong point, having only built 6 council houses in their last term in power at the Scottish Government. On making North Lanarkshire the place to learn, the SNP have funded PEF to close the attainment gap, Scottish Attainment Fund to close the attainment gap, investing in North Lanarkshire. On investing in North Lanarkshire and working in North Lanarkshire, Scottish Government, thank you, Scottish Government funding and policies benefit the people of North Lanarkshire every day, from developing the young workforce to our investment in the small business bonus and our town centre fund. The notion that Labour are the founders of these pillars is nothing short of a brass neck, and I am sick and tired of hearing every time and time again the Labour administration taking Scottish Government policies and government funding and repainting them as Labour vanity projects. It's the SNP government that's funding these day-to-day activities. And I won't even begin to comment on the Tories amendment because it's a Rule Britannia speech. The only parody is not the Holyrood group in the SNP. It's the Tories at Westminster, at Holyrood and in local government. They are a parody led by the parody himself. Provost, the amendment is a nonsense, and I hope that colleagues will vote for the motion, outlining our commitment to ridding ourselves of these weapons of mass destruction. Thank you.
Mark.
Provost, there's another 2 speakers have indicated they wish to come in. In fact, sorry, there's a point of order being raised by Councillor Gallagher before we come to
Councillor Gallagher.
Provost, this meeting's descending into absolute chaos here. We've now got members that are having arguments over the chat bar. Can we please stop this and actually act like councillors? You know, we're meant to be representing our constituents here, and we're not putting on a good show, I can assure you.
That's not, Councillor Gallagher, that's not a point of order, but you're correct. I did ask people at the start not to use the chat bar for things like this. But what people have to remember is that chat bar is recorded. Whilst it doesn't go out in the live stream, these issues are there for people to see. And yes, some of the comments that are coming up are becoming a bit not appropriate, and people should be either doing it to their group by clicking off everyone or keeping it to themselves. Mark, we're about to indicate more speakers.
Yeah, Provost, we've got Councillor Feeney and Councillor Duffy have indicated that they wish to come in.
Councillor Feeney.
Thanks, Provost. This motion is very much relevant. The people in North Lanarkshire are taxpayers, and it's very much relevant for us to discuss if constituents are coming forward with us. Who in here wants to know that Trump and Boris Johnson has his hand on the red button when it comes to nuclear weapons? I'm appalled, like many in the meeting today, about the UK government's plan to replace Trident. Every one of us elected members have a duty to promote international peace and solidarity, and renewing Trident fails to uphold these values. Labour are forgetting. I was a proud Labour delegate to Scottish Conference, and I spoke against the renewal of Trident, and I was equally proud that it was passed. 70% of the delegates that day voted in favour of not renewing Trident. Scrapping Trident could give us 100,000 firefighters, it could give us 120,000 nurses and 120,000 teachers. There is no moral justification, and it doesn't protect against cyber attacks, and it doesn't protect against terrorism. I hear the argument of loss of jobs from the Tories. It would take 15 years to decommission Trident, giving plenty of time to train people into the green revolution industry jobs. Let's remind everybody, 2,000 jobs have been lost in North Lanarkshire in the last 10 years. I don't see any big outcry there when jobs were lost, but yet we're all worrying about jobs going down the road in Faz Lane. We have plenty of jobs, high-skilled jobs, when we go into green industrial revolution and training people up. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, the Trident, if it was to disappear from Scotland, would have a catastrophic consequences for jobs, not just at Coolport, Councillor Feeney mentioned, but up in Rosyth and in the yards of the Clyde. these alternative jobs, we hear about green jobs and all these other different jobs that will be created. But the reality is, and they're not my words, they're the words of Gary. I'll take my advice from a GMB call. Acknowledge, though, there's a cozy political consensus emerging around anti-Trident against the tide. But our job for real people, where that depend on us, are too important for us to get involved in this Alice in Wonderland politics. The motion for the SNP's got nothing to do with Scottish jobs and protecting them. The Labour Government Council to focus on the jobs local communities elected us to do in 27. And the Labour Group will continue to and beyond.
Provost, another two speakers have indicated that they wish to come in. First of all, Councillor Larson and Councillor Bartley, and now, sorry, Councillor McNally as well.
Councillor Larson.
Thanks, Provost. Time I checked, we lived in what I consider to be a participatory democracy, and motions like this, in my mind, allow our citizens, our constituents, the opportunity to assert their voice, establish social norms, to establish their values, and to set the culture in such a way that it's not dictated to them or set by a hegemonic state. And so opportunities like this are few and far between, and I think we should welcome them, and we should praise people in the community for wanting to contribute towards the running of their own society, and that's something that, you know, the people in the SNP as a value hold very dear. And Council, ultimately, the ultimate relevancy of these motions is not for us to determine. We are representatives, which means it's our job to make other people's voice heard in a public forum when they themselves can't be present. And so quite often I've had people bring stuff to me that I don't agree with, but I will still represent them, because I'm not here to represent SNP constituents. I am here to represent anybody who seeks my assistance with a matter. And the ultimate relevancy of these motions will be determined at the ballot box in 2022. And how dare, in my mind, that the leader of the council tell the people what is and what isn't relevant, because we are here to facilitate their voices, not our own. And given the sort of global context that we're living in right now, seeing the rise of authoritarian states and seeing the rise of different fascist groups across Europe, across the international world, I think is very poignant. It's very poignant, this motion, in terms of reminding us of what harm can be done when things get out of control. And obviously, nuclear weapons would allow and become the vehicle for such things to get out of control. So just on that note, I want to say that I very much welcome the motion, but more than welcoming the motion, I welcome the contribution from the community group who brought the motion forward. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Sorry, Provost. Thanks, Provost, for giving me time to speak. Once again, I find myself being really, really disappointed. It's another motion that we brought to Council with the expectation that we probably would get an amendment from our colleagues in the Conservatives. I didn't expect to get such an amendment from our Labour colleagues, simply because that the council has already signed up, and that this should have been pretty well straightforward. It is about what our constituents have brought to us, and it's about taking a moral course of exactly as a council what we believe in. Now, the Tory amendment has at least tried to debate what the motion is about. I fundamentally disagree with everything that they've said, but at least they have attempted to debate what the motion was about. What the Labour motion and what the leader of the council has brought forward is in order to say, well, This is what we think you should be able to talk about, not what your constituents want you to talk about. And that it's going to become very, very narrow parameters. Now, we've brought motions forward about congratulating residents within our wards within North Lanarkshire. We've brought forward motions about Auchingeach. We've brought forward joint motions on a number of things and considering fair trade. Is the leader of the council going to look at narrow focus to determine that these are not the type of things that in the perspective of the Labour group that we shouldn't be discussing? Now, to look at the actual our motion, it says that we've brought this motion out not because of the motion, but for other reasons. Well, I wonder if it's to do within the Labour group, because obviously there's a split within the Labour group of who wants to keep Trident and who doesn't. Now, I'm just going to quote something, and I am actually, as a socialist, I like reading stuff that's to do with socialism, and a lot to do with what a lot within Labour agree with. And one is from a Labour list survey that came out in the last couple of days. Now, they surveyed just over 7,000 of their readers, and 80.9% of those readers said that they were party members of the Labour Party, and of those, only 12.3% actually supported Trident renewal. So, when I read that, my expectation was that when this would come forward, that this would be a straightforward thing for my Labour colleagues to be able to agree on. And it isn't. And it's actually really, really saddened me for them to bring an amendment forward like this, when actually the crux of that amendment about focusing on jobs and focusing about all of the things that this council would do, I totally 100% agree on. But we're more than that. We're actually meant to show some sort of leadership about what the council is about, not just about focusing on the minutiae and not about focusing on what is statutory. And that is a word that really worries me, because if you concentrate on what is statutory, what about the other things that are important to our constituents within North Lanarkshire that is out with that? So I'm going to finish on that, because all I can say is that, yes, I am very, very disappointed on the amendment that came from the leader of the council and the deputy leader. Thank you. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor McNally.
Thanks, Provost. I wasn't actually planning to come in on this debate, but I was disappointed by Councillor London's comments in relation to North Lanarkshire. He's always fairly complimentary of the service that is provided by North Lanarkshire Council. And I did think it was unfortunate that he seemed to suggest in his remarks that North Lanarkshire almost goes along on the coattails of the Scottish Government. And I don't think that's a fair analysis. If we actually look at the record of this council over the course of the last several years, let's look at where this council is leading the way and actually shaping the narrative across the country. We had the Youth Investment Programme, which supported more than 6,000 people into work, and that has evolved into the Winter Leavers Programme, which we see now, which is an incredible programme supporting our young people. Again, North Lanarkshire being innovative, leading the way. Club 365, again, North Lanarkshire leading the way. Our 195 probationers were offered a job at the start of this pandemic. We were the first council to come out and say that before the government had even committed to doing anything about it. We were out there and we were making that commitment. Again, North Lanarkshire leading the way. The most comprehensive house building programme in Scotland, creating thousands of jobs. The Club 365 voucher scheme, again supporting families in the most need. committing to replacing our school estate, 100 schools effectively built before 1996. I've got to say there is no commitment at the minute from the Scottish Government to support that capital initiative, and that's something that I hope that they will come forward and support us with. And of course, the delivery of 1140, which is now completely rolled out across North Lanarkshire, when the Scottish Government, of course, removed the statutory obligation to do so. And of course, we have the plan.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a point of order being raised by Councillor Feeney.
Feeney.
Sorry, Councillor McNally isn't speaking to the motion.
As I said earlier on, the amendment is about us doing the J job, and he's listing what we do as a J job, so I don't think it's a point of order. Thanks. Can you unmute again, Councillor McNally?
Sorry, and of course we have the plan for North Lanarkshire, which of course will transform our towns and villages across North Lanarkshire. You know, and again, I've got to say, I'm not seeing anything from the Scottish Government to say that they have a master plan to transform communities across Scotland in the way that North Lanarkshire is committed to doing so for our towns and villages, and that's just a fact. But I think there is another point that was raised there, which I thought was unfortunate, and I think that the SNP struggled to kind of understand how things in the council work at times. The Labour group is not going to bring motions to full council. We're the administration. The administration set policy through committee. That's how it works. If you want to bring forward a motion on a subject, you're absolutely entitled to do it. There's no doubt about it. But you should not be surprised that the opposition groups in the council will present more motions when the administration develop and pursue policy through committee, agreed with conveners in advance of committee. So I think there needs to be a proper understanding of how council works, and I'm sure that SNP members might be interested in that moving forward. So I'll leave it at that, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any more speakers indicated?
The final speaker, Provost, is Councillor Baird.
Councillor Baird.
Thank you, Provost. Just a few things. I mean, we might have expected from our colleagues in the Conservative Party to go along and support what was happening at Faz Lane. But again, it's the inaccuracies that go along with it. The MOD actually doesn't employ 15,000 people at Faz Lane. I think it's just over 6,500 people work in and around Faz Lane. 4,500 of those with the MOD. That includes service personnel, civil servants, etc., and 2,500 with Babcock and other companies on the site. Again, and we heard how it would be devastating if those jobs were to go with Trident, and yet in freedom of information requests made to Westminster, it has been shown that there's only 575 jobs actually within the Faz Lane complex which relate to the Trident submarines. So again, over-egging the pudding in that one. Other issues with what they're saying, the policy statement or what was commented on with regards to the nuclear submarines protecting the United Kingdom. This is the same United Kingdom that has for the last 18 years, I believe, not been able to carry out the commitments to NATO in regards to covering and protecting the northern approaches in the North Atlantic. That is why we see so many incursions by the Russian Navy and Air Force. So much so that in one incursion, by the time the Navy responded to it by sending a frigate from its base in Portsmouth, not only had
Councillor Baird, you're starting to stray off a bit. You were fine at the start about the figures of people working, but sending frigates out to sea was mentioned by nobody. If you could kind of start to
I-
keep to the
I'm
point
just-
we're keeping to.
Okay, I'm talking the Conservative colleagues started to go on about the nuclearisation, why nuclear weapons were important to the defence of the UK. So sorry if it strays off to that. I was just trying to show that, you know, when it comes to defence, maybe the fact that the money being spent in Trident would be better spent on putting frigates in the Scottish bases. It may be better spent on tanks, of which we're having to look at cutting. Maybe better spent on a whole host of things that would help defend the United Kingdom. Nuclear submarines haven't protected us from extremist terrorism. Nuclear missiles haven't protected us from COVID, which is having a far greater impact on our economy and our health. So, I mean, I think that this whole, sort of flying the naval ensign from our colleagues is a part about disingenuous, really, rather than attending to what is contained within the actual motion, and that is the horror of nuclear weapons being, travelling through North Lanarkshire on its way to Faslane or Aldershot to be fixed. Nuclear weapons, which at the end of the day, if they had to be used, we couldn't use unless America gave us permission to use them, because they hold the keys. And that is one of the biggest failings within this sort of big toys for the big boys type thing. We don't have an independent nuclear deterrent. The only European country to have that is France, and they have their own systems. Again, I would have liked the Conservative Party to address, and the Labour Party address what's in this. It's about the humanism or the inhumanity of man to use these weapons against civilians. We do need, nuclear processes which help in health with X-rays, etc. But we don't need these missiles. Thank you.
Provost, there's one further speaker. Councillor Stubbs has indicated that he wishes to come in. And apologies, there's another one, sorry. And Councillor Cullen.
Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be as brief as I can. I know that we've discussed this for quite some time. Just to pick up on a couple of the points that have been made in the debate. The first thing that I would, before doing that, I'd like to say is that it's extremely disappointing. I think many of my colleagues have said that, to see this amendment from the Labour Party. The Tory amendment is to be expected on this issue, but from the Labour Party to put forward this and effectively, and I'm sure we're going to see that their members are going to be forced to vote against what Danish and Alan have put forward, which will go against the grain for them. It will go against every aspect of their moral fibre, to vote against a motion that calls for nuclear weapons to be abolished within Scotland. Jim Logue says to pick up on quite a few points that Jim Logue said. The first point about talking about people with aspirations, and that there's SNP or Conservative members in here that put things forward because they want to be parliamentarians or anything else. I get that that there's not going to be much aspiration within the Labour Party at the moment. There's not much hope for anybody to be elected to Parliament, the way the political circles are at the moment. But I always find it quite interesting that committees, and particularly the full council, to watch the manoeuvring that's going on within his own group as they look to replace him. In terms of the point that of jobs at Faslane, I get that people will be worried about their jobs, but employment of a few thousand is not a reason to do away with the moral aspect and the very dangerous thing. It's not safe to put it in the Thames, so they put it on the Clyde. I think that's quite simply what the decision was taken, to put the nuclear weapons on the Clyde rather than anywhere else. Far more jobs could be supported in that area through conventional defence systems rather than through nuclear weapons, as David Baird touched on. And for Jim to say that we should be, that his group, his administration is focused only on the delivery of great services, I think I might be paraphrasing slightly, but it would certainly come across that. I don't think that there'll be many people out there that agree with that. That if that is where their focus has been, they've gone somewhere drastically wrong in some of the decisions that they've taken, such as the closure of Cobowie and the continued decision to do away with all outdoor learning for the people of North Lanarkshire. There's plenty of other decisions that have been taken by this administration over the last few years. To focus on statutory responsibility, I think the majority of certainly a hell of a lot of the stuff that is done by this council that doesn't fall within the statutory responsibility, and that is, I think, my colleagues, Claire Barclay in particular, that highlighted this issue. That's an extremely worrying point that's been put forward in that amendment, which, if it's accepted, it might even, under the famous 6-month rule, might even stop us discussing things that are within the responsibility of the council but isn't a statutory responsibility. My final point, Nathan Wilson made the point, and I want to address this because I don't see that I don't like the idea of being accused of somebody not addressing it from within the SNP. It's correct that the SNP conference voted 8 years ago to change its policy, change the party's policy on membership of NATO and an independent Scotland. 1 minute. Thanks, Andrew, but this is my last point anyway. Nathan's a bit younger than me. I was at the conference. I voted against it, as did a large number of delegates at that conference. Voted against changing that policy. The SNP as a party has changed quite dramatically since then. It's grown more than 5-fold in membership, and I would expect at some point, if it's discussed, and I'm sure it will be discussed again, that policy, you could see a reversal there again. It doesn't tie in with my beliefs. Membership of NATO, while it remains a first strike, retains its first strike policy, is not compatible with my view on disarmament of nuclear weapons across the world, but particularly here. I would urge the Labour members who are battling with their conscience defy your whip and vote for the motion.
Councillor Cullen.
Thanks, I don't intend to take up too much time with the long enough. However, I just want to reiterate, nobody in the Conservative Party supports nuclear weapons or the keeping of nuclear weapons, but it's a necessity, and it's a necessity that the Conservative Party support. Conservative Party, as was mentioned in Nathan's speech, are all for the multilateral decommissioning of nuclear weapons across the world. But the fact of the matter is, if you do it unilaterally, you leave yourself in a position of weakness. Councillor Linden mentioned we wanted to live in a world with compassion and love, and that should be our values. He's absolutely right. But tell that to the tens of millions of people that have died in wars, in previous wars, that nuclear weapons have possibly prevented in the 75 years since the end of World War II. Councillor Larson mentioned that we live in an unstable world and that there's a rise in authoritarian states. She mentioned in particular fascist states, but whether they're fascist or left-wing states, they're still authoritarian, and there are many states around the world who actively try and get a hold of weapons. And until we're in a position where the entire world can decommission nuclear weapons, then it's absolutely imperative that the UK maintains that deterrent in order to deter potential aggressors from affecting the security of the people of the United Kingdom, which is what the role of the UK government is in terms of security. Councillor Stubbs mentioned employment shouldn't be a reason for keeping Trident. He's absolutely right. It shouldn't be a reason for keeping Trident. But what should be a reason for keeping Trident is security. And what will always be the case is the Conservative Party will always support the security and maintain the security of the United Kingdom. And at present, part of that security package, alongside other elements of the armed forces, is the retention of an independent, Councillor Baird, independent nuclear deterrent that's under the control of the UK government. And as long as we maintain that deterrent, we should maintain it and push for a world free of nuclear weapons. But until we can ensure that the world is free of nuclear weapons and potential aggressors, then we need to maintain the security of the people of the United Kingdom, not just give it up in the hope that no potential aggressor takes advantage of the fact that we've no longer got it. Thank you.
There's no other speakers. Councillor Logue, then Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Ashraf to sum up. So Councillor Logue.
Provost, can I say I'm absolutely delighted that this meeting's has been given live streaming. We've spent nearly 60 minutes talking about this issue. Can I just go through some of the specific points? Tom Johnson asked a question about payments to the external organisations. Can I say many of these are historical, Tom, and you'll be given your opportunity when it comes to the budget to air your views there as to whether or not we should continue giving funding to a whole range of disparate external groups. Jordan raises the point of the contributions from the Scottish Government. Jordan, none of us are ignorant of the fact that over 80% of our revenue funding comes from the Scottish Government. I say that repeatedly at meetings, and we respect that is the financial position, with about 14 or 15% coming from council tax and from the council. We accept that. Your issue in relation to CLNL and asking why this wasn't agreed is an urgent motion. The Provost has already clarified that, but can I just amplify? This was raised at the P&S committee 2 weeks ago, and I gave an undertaking that the issue of CLNL would come back to the next meeting of P&S in December, and there would be a detailed report there. What we are doing, what CLNL are doing just now.
Jim, can you just sum up on the points you made earlier on? I know that Councillor London raised it, but we dealt with that at the time, so you could continue with the points without raising that. Thank you.
I'm trying to say that, what do you call it, there will be a detailed report at the P&S committee in December in relation to this. In terms of the opening of the facilities, because clearly,
Councillor Logue, can we continue with what you're introducing new business? I know that Councillor London brought it into his question. He was told to detract from that. So if you could continue to sum up on the information that was used earlier on.
I thought when you were summing up, Jean, you should make comments on the points which have been raised in discussions about your own particular motion or amendment. And that's what I'm attempting to do. But I'll move on at your request. And in relation to the point Angela Feeney made, can I say, I am not and have never said we should not discuss nuclear disarmament. It is too important an issue not to discuss. But let's discuss that in a forum which can influence the decision makers about the policy of disarmament in this country. And that is, and we're all in we operate in political environments, and we know where we can exert that influence. And that's what I'm saying. We should use the appropriate and proportionate forum for raising issues such as nuclear disarmament. It's too important an issue not to discuss, but is it the right place at a council meeting to raise that? We are not decision makers when it comes to either arm or disarm. In terms of directing consignments. We've been told that this motion has come about because one group contacted one or two elected members. We all signpost consignments to the appropriate forum for influencing outcomes. And if a consignment comes to me about a hospital waiting list, do I bring it to the council? No. I direct them to an MSP and say that that is the best approach in order to effect what they want to achieve. And the point Alan Stubbs made about democracy, Alan, we all operate in a democratic environment. And I have known that for over 40 years. And can I tell you, I have always abided by the outcome of democratic decisions, and will always. So if there are those who are unhappy at all, then I'm sure they know that. But I'll leave it at that just now, and hopefully ask that the amendment should be supported.
Councillor Wilson.
Trying agree with it. We probably shouldn't be debating. I'll also say, even although that's my personal view, which is what submitted moment.
Provost, sorry. Can the councillor turn his video off, please? He's breaking up.
Nathan, some of the members are finding it hard to hear you. Sometimes it's clearer when your video's off.
Okay, I'll
want
pop
to try
that
that?
off. Now. Yep.
It's any clearer?
I've not. Hold on, I've not got to it. Right, this should be hit out. Right, hello. Is that any? Am I speaking clearer now? Is that
yes,
better?
Yes, you're a lot clearer now. Thanks.
Okay, right. Well, I'll just start again because I'm not sure how much of my initial comments were heard. So, just on the Labour amendment, as it is written, I do largely agree with what's said. I don't think we should be debating nuclear weapons because it's not an issue that North Lanarkshire Council has responsibility for. It was deemed competent to appear on the agenda, and because of that, then I think we should debate the substance of the motion, which is why the Conservatives moved the amendment that we did. I've approached the debate the way we did, although overall, I do think it is a forum for some more localised issues and less by exception, and I can't disagree with the general sense expressed in the Labour amendment. The key point from the amendment is that the SNP group were wanting Council to give its support for the United Nations Treaty and the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So given that is the case, I'm a bit surprised that the SNP haven't really spent a lot of time getting into detail about the treaty and set out why it would be right for the UK government to sign this, why it would be superior to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and why it would be a better route towards the eventual aim of nuclear disarmament. I set out in my initial speech why I thought it was a wrong approach and pointed out its flaws. So I really think, based on the motion the SNP have submitted, they really should try to have made an attempt to set out why they believe this treaty is the best route to a nuclear-free world. David Baer made some points about the nuclear deterrent and its independence, which Councillor Cullen responded to. And just to expand on what Councillor Cullen was saying, it's not accurate to say the UK's deterrent is not independent, because it is. Decision-making and use of Trident remains entirely sovereign to the UK. It is only the British Prime Minister who can authorise the launch of nuclear weapons, and that ensures political control by this country is maintained at all times. The instruction to fire, it would be transmitted to the submarine using only UK codes and UK equipment, and this means the command and control procedures for Britain's nuclear deterrent is fully independent. The procurement relationship the UK has with the US regarding Trident, this in no way compromises the operational independence of our nuclear deterrent. I'll conclude. A number of members have raised the issue of the cost of maintaining a nuclear deterrent and said that we shouldn't be spending money. Have one or two facts. The in-service costs of a new Trident weapons system will amount to just 6% of the UK's entire defence budget. Review £100 of government spending. So quite simply, the cost of maintaining Trident are not as onerous. So put a price people safe. So it is absolutely extreme forms of aggressive democracy and our way of life. I'll conclude there, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Thank you, Provost. The amount of time saying this is a waste of time and does not deserve to be heard is a slap in the face of residents. Councillors have remarked that they are thankful this is being streamed, and I too share that because it shows contempt for those who elected us to this chamber. Councillor Burgess says it ended the war. It did occur at the end of the war, but it didn't end it itself. It killed many innocent people, including children. They did not need to die, as Councillor Burgess has mentioned. This callous attitude of war is ingrained, unfortunately, in the Tories, hailing from their Rule Britannia delusions of former glory on an empire upon which the sun has set many, many years ago. Japan was seeking to surrender. It was not even universally supported in the United States. It was used to showcase its power to the Soviet Union, then to defeat Japan. And the civilians of Japan paid the price for that show with their lives. Further, Councillor Burgess says that our motion is an attack on government. It is not. And I resent to be told that as an elected member of this chamber, that our work here is an attack. It is the right of every resident in North Lanarkshire to have their voice heard through myself and Alan Masterton and all other councillors in this chamber. And when we speak, Tory colleagues would do well to listen, as it was mentioned that our speeches did not address the issues in the motion, when it was entirely did. Councillor Masterton addressed the treaty directly. Perhaps Councillor Wilson's intervention should address his colleague and friend, Councillor Logue, in his relevance to the debate. I won't address the comments Councillor Logue made, except to say, since it is clear Councillor Logue is clearly taking an interest in the internal processes of the SNP, he may wish to jump ship before Labour is utterly wiped out at the next Scottish Parliament election. I'll move on. Save it to the Tories to make £140 billion sound like pocket change as 6%, just 6%. The interventions I'd be disappointed to say the least. Moving on to the motion, having been brought by a local church group wanting to raise the lessons that should have been learned at the time about these weapons of mass destruction, we are raising the issue. Many at the time knew civilization would live to regret their use, their existence, and now we are much more aware of the financial costs, but still pales into insignificance when weighed up against the cost of innumerable lives lost, including those of children. Our Conservative members may wish to dance around the details regarding the true heinous nature of these weapons and reduce them to working 365 and showing how much value for money it is. But our citizens also work 365 a year. There isn't a day in the calendar when there aren't citizens in this country working to keep a roof over their heads and food on their tables. It is a slap in the face to spend this money on renewing weaponry because citizens and children in foreign lands, while ours are being told austerity is the way here by politicians south of the border and leaving us with little but hard choices to make north. My thanks to the Holy Cross Church Group for bringing this forward and for exercising your democratic right and lobbying us for this worthy cause, and to colleagues who have expressed their support for this motion, showing it is a cross-party concern. Elected members, please support this motion.
Andrew, can we go to the vote, please?
Yes, Provost. This will be a two-stage vote. The first vote will be the motion by Councillor Ashraf against the amendment by Councillor Wilson. If members can indicate whether they support the motion, the amendment, or if they wish to abstain. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Baird. Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barclay.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge.
Abstain.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Abstain.
Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor Burrows.
Abstain.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor Carragher.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Abstain.
Councillor Castles.
Abstain.
Councillor Michael Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Cullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Abstain.
Councillor Curry.
Amendment.
Councillor Damasio.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty.
Abstain.
Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Abstain.
Councillor Fannin.
Motion.
Councillor Farouk.
Motion.
Councillor Feeney.
Motion.
Councillor Fisher.
Abstain.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Councillor Goldsack.
Abstain.
Councillor Gurley.
Abstain.
Councillor Graham.
Abstain.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion.
Motion. Councillor Hume.
Motion.
Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Jones.
Abstain.
Councillor Kelly.
Abstain.
Councillor Larson.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon.
Motion.
Councillor Linden.
Motion.
Councillor Logue.
Abstain.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McGowan.
Motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Abstain.
Councillor McKendrick. Councillor McKendrick. No. Councillor McLaren.
Abstain.
Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNally.
Abstain.
Councillor McNeil. Councillor McNeil.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor McPake.
Abstain.
Councillor McVeigh.
Abstain.
Councillor McVeigh. Abstain, sorry. Councillor Mooney.
Abstain.
Councillor Morgan.
Abstain.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Abstain.
Councillor Pettigrew.
Motion.
Councillor Quigley.
Abstain.
Councillor Redding.
Abstain.
Councillor Rorty.
Abstain.
Councillor Shevlin.
Abstain.
Councillor Shields. Councillor Shields. Councillor Stephen.
Motion.
Councillor Stevenson.
Abstain.
Councillor Stocks.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Alan Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Annette Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Weir.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Woods.
Abstain.
The amendment received 7 votes the motion 33 with 31 abstentions. So the motion continues to be the motion and now will be voted against the amendment by Councillor Logue. I'll now call your names again. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barclay.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge.
Amendment.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Amendment.
Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor Burrows.
Amendment.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Carragher.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Amendment.
Councillor Castles.
Amendment.
Councillor Michael Coyle. Councillor Michael Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Does not motion the latest scrutiny.
Councillor Cullen.
An account.
Amendment. Amendment, thank you. Councillor Curran.
Amendment.
Councillor Curry.
Amendment.
Councillor Damasio.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty.
Amendment.
Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Duffy.
Amendment.
Amendment, thank you. Councillor Fannin. Councillor Fannin.
Motion.
Motion, thank you. Councillor Farouk.
Motion.
Councillor Feeney.
Motion.
Councillor Fisher.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Motion. Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Gurley.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion.
Councillor Hume.
Motion.
Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Jones.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Councillor Larson.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon.
Motion.
Councillor Linden.
Motion.
Councillor Logue.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McGowan. Councillor McGowan.
Motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Amendment.
Councillor McKendrick, are you still here? No. Councillor McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNally.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeil.
Amendment.
Councillor McPake.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh.
Amendment.
Councillor Mooney.
Amendment.
Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morgan.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor O'Rourke.
Amendment.
Councillor Pettigrew.
Motion.
Councillor Quigley.
Amendment.
Councillor Reddin.
Amendment.
Councillor Rorty.
Amendment.
Councillor Shevlin.
Amendment.
Councillor Shields.
Amendment.
Amendment. Amendment. Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Motion.
Councillor Stevenson.
Amendment.
Councillor Stokes.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Alan Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Annette Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Weir.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Woods.
Amendment.
Thank you. The amendment has received 39 votes. The motion 33 with no abstentions. So the amendment by Councillor Logue is carried.
Can I again remind people to mute their mics? I can hear some mutterings of people who've not got their mics mute. So put your Microphone and mute while you're not speaking, please. Agenda item 6, it was a notice of motions from Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Watson. As I indicated earlier, this item has been withdrawn. Agenda item 7 is a notice of motion from Councillor Larson and Councillor Carragher. There is no amendment indicated to your motion. Do you still wish to speak? Councillor Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I would like to speak to the motion. Thank you. So the period you would have heard people talk how being outdoors in itself has helped them cope with the stress.
Councillor Larson, we're struggling to hear you. I know you put your video off, so hopefully we'll hear you better now.
To learn.
Just without the mic. Is that better? No? No.
A lot better, thanks.
Thank you. It's associated with play and many. It can help tackle mental health, physical. It can also and help us to teach children to respect those environments. And in researching the motion, Provost, I came across space strategy published in 2004 has a duty to ensure that open space meets the needs of communities and promotes greater social inclusion. This motion seeks to build on that and it seeks to recognise that our communities change both in terms of how they've been impacted by the pandemic and also in terms of our agenda. To have an analytic and perhaps civic assessment of outdoor space. Up and down equal divides have been renewing their commitment to maximising one of them recently delivered a very innovative package that includes Easter House, Pollock and Springburn. And essentially, although I would probably recommend that you read it yourself, but essentially they've given control and responsibility for football pitches and their management to football and said, you see what you can do with it. Underpinning the pilot is that more positive activities can not only help physical and mental health, but also this further opportunity to take part in positive can actually help to tackle things like crime, unemployment and other wider social issues. Like many, I have been contacted by football teams out to the pandemic and during the pandemic to tell me about the difficulties they've experienced, and he told me I had 180 youngsters wanting to play football, and he was, and obviously you can't share transport and stuff, so very difficult. I've had community groups contact me since the reopening of country parks to tell me that people with disabilities are feeling excluded because of access to toilet facilities. Whilst this isn't a criticism, because I totally appreciate fully that the focus of council, quite rightly, has been on compliance with the legislative framework. But I think we should take this opportunity with the motion to just iterate our commitment to being much more innovative and inclusive as we move forward. And I think innovation's at the heart of what I'm saying. I've also had people tell me that they've moved their exercise classes outdoors and asked for more. Council, it's clear to me that people they want to continue living their lives in the best way that they can. And for me, this motion means that we can help facilitate more opportunities for the common good. Councillor, I believe sincerely that if we are more innovative in our approach, in terms of maximising the assets that we have, in terms of open space, and transforming them into real opportunities for outdoor play and activity, I believe that, you know, this could benefit and promote not only people's mental health, but also the economy and, of course, the environment. And just on that note, I would welcome your support of the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Carragher.
Thanks, Provost. I don't think I need to add anything further to what Councillor Larsson has said there. I'm just want to say I'm really pleased that there's been no amendment put into this motion and that all councillors are supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion's unanimously carried. Then we move on to the number 8, the notice of motion from Councillor Larsson and Councillor Goldie. Councillor Larsson, bearing in mind that in the last couple of weeks we've been getting really extensive updates from Stephen Penman and Carolyn Cool-Miller 7 days a week and sometimes twice and 3 times in a day to make sure we're kept up to date, and there's no amendment. Do you still wish to speak?
Provost, if you wouldn't mind, I want to say that I welcome the changes that I've seen over the last few weeks, and I'm appreciative of the fact that Council has to consider compliance with the legislation, and that Council also has to consider privacy and other factors as well. Concern, but particularly in the secondary schools, the virus didn't respect that ward boundary, and of course schools overlap into other wards. And so I just want to say that I very much welcome the changes that I have seen in recent weeks. I also just want to say that for me personally, the more transparent we can be as a council with the information that we share, not only with elected members but with also the public, it allows us to make informed choices about how much we want to expose our own risk and make judgments on that basis. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Goldie.
Very briefly, Provost, just to thank everyone for letting us go through without divide, and also to thank the corporate communications team for the increased information across ward boundaries that we've been getting over the last wee while. It's really, really welcomed. And as Councillor Larsson said, the virus doesn't know ward boundaries, and it allows us to communicate more effectively with people who are affected within our areas. So just thanks again, thanks for putting it through without divide.
And again, thanks to Stephen and Carolyn Cool-Miller, because we're getting some of these through on Saturdays and Sundays as well. When everybody else has got maybe trying to get some time off, they're working to make sure that we're kept up to date. Agenda item 9 is a notice of motion from Councillor Damasio and Councillor Dinesh Ashraf, and there's an amendment from Councillor Burrows and Councillor McNeill. Councillor Damasio.
Thank you, Provost. Can I start by saying this motion is being presented today to Council with the very best of intentions. I'm a little perplexed as to the true reason the supposedly socialist Labour Party members have for trying to block the motion by submitting their amendment today. If I can remind members of the contents of the motion submitted, currently for contracts below threshold requiring committee approval, officers simply provide a small appendix with as follows: contract name, description, successful tenderer, applicable dates and values, as well as the number of tenderers received. And that's it. This motion simply seeks some more detail and transparency within that reporting to relevant committees, provided for elected members information which they should not have to each individually go to the relevant officer to find out. That information should be there at the committee, or within the committee paper itself. These are simply items for overview purposes, which each and every councillor should be interested in receiving on contract awards, issues for that matter that all of our constituents would expect us to be updated on. So what I'm asking for today is that the current information being provided should include the following: details explaining the scope of the contract referred to in some detail. I'm not expecting War and Peace here, simply what the contract is actually for, which peculiarly is not always necessarily covered. Information on how many companies tendering were local and where tenderers are located. Again, members simply wish to have an overview and see how successful we are as a council in encouraging our local businesses. Constituents would wish us to have that oversight in relation to local employment and for a whole variety of reasons. Information on tenderers' SME status. Similarly, simply providing this information lets members have some oversight on how many SMEs are becoming involved in the tendering process for council contracts. Next up, details on how many businesses tendering are currently paying the real living wage. Giving us some oversight. The payment of the living wage is extremely important, particularly here in North Lanarkshire. We have so many areas suffering from poverty and deprivation. Incidentally, I believe it may encourage some employers to pay the living wage who aren't currently, and that would be a good thing, surely. I refer to some interesting data in relation to the real living wage. 86% of real living wage employers say it has improved their business reputation. 75% say it has increased motivation and retention rates of employees. Paying the living wage attracts the best and the brightest into businesses also, with 93% of graduates seeking to work for employers. If I can also refer to some damning facts, unfortunately, you know, we still have, in support of such oversight, we still have, unfortunately, in Scotland in this day and age, tens of thousands of people, in Lanarkshire, North Lanarkshire, tens of thousands of people who don't earn the living wage, tens of thousands of people who live in poverty, despite one person in their household being in work.
1 minute.
And that is precisely why the real living wage was introduced, to try and reduce that problem. Lastly, a brief description of the community benefits provided by the successful tender applicant, again giving members that oversight of what volume of tenderers are providing community benefits during the term of the contracts approved by council. These are not things that we as councillors should have to go seeking constantly. This information should be provided to us as standard as it is elsewhere. To deny councillors this information today by either voting against the motion or seeking to present an alternative motion which does none of the aforementioned would simply be blocking for blocking's sake, because it is presented, in my opinion, by the SNP. Thank you.
Councillor Dinesh Ashraf.
Thanks. So for this one, quite a small contribution from myself, as Paul has covered it in quite some detail. What the motion is asking for is quite nominal information that would aid the trust and transparency work of this council. This is well detailed, it's well thought out, and does nothing but to raise the standards that we work within this council along. I support the motion fully. I would like to encourage all elected members to support it in its entirety, and I hereby second this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Provost. I'm unsure about why the SNP councillors keep bringing this again and again. At least twice I think they've tried to change the Procurement General Contract Standing Orders. The SNP group repeatedly tell us how well our officers operate and work, but I think there seems to be a wee bit of mistrust here of dedicated procurement staff. That was the word that was used there. But let's get into the motion. There's basically 5 points which require a response. But before I do, I discuss very carefully with the officers of the motion to make sure I'm providing the correct information. Now, I'm going to read out the 5 bullet points by the motion and I'll respond accordingly. I need to read it off the paper to make sure I get it right about the motion. Motion 1, at the first part, detailing explaining the scope of the contract referred to in some detail. My understanding is that this detail is written pre-tender and is available along with detail of all items requested within the procuring service. Number 2, information on how companies tendering were local and where all tenders are located. This data generally obtained as standard from a tender process at a tender opening. Number 3, information on all tendering SME status. The response is this detail is already requested as part of a tender submission, and when using the ESPD, that's the European Single Procurement Document, and this detail would be requested as part of a tenderer submission if not using ESPD. Number 4 is details on how many businesses tendering were currently paying the real living wage. This detail would be requested as part of a tenderer submission. And the last one, the 5th, is a brief description of any community benefits. This detail would be requested as part of a tenderer submission. Provost, in effect, every single item requested in the motion is already in place. On the 4th of October 2018, a procurement motion was approved by the General Contract Standing Order. At this time, we do not see the need to change them. After the changes in 2018, extensive training for staff and elected members were part of the orders. Mind you, there might have been a number of SNP councillors missing from that training. Who knows? If councillors need to discuss elements of procurement, they can liaise directly with procurement lead officers to request appropriate information. Prior to the 2018 changes, there was work to do in procurement, but our small dedicated team have risen to the challenge and broke into the top performance band in the procurement and commercial improvement plan, especially in the leadership and governance. It is one thing to achieve this standard, but equally difficult to maintain it. I am sure, however, our procurement team will once again rise to that challenge at our next assessment. Provost, given my comments, I am unsure why there is a motion here. 24th of September, nearly 3 weeks ago, we had our Finance and Resource Committee, and guess what? There were 2 important reports on procurement. The first report was a procurement strategy for 2022. There were 25 detailed pages looking ahead to reflect on future work. Not a question linked to the motion, but the report highlighted under measures of success that contracts support and delivery of council properties, contracts awarded by the council are compliant with procurement legislation. Procurement delivers a range of benefits, including benefits to the local economy through contracts with local businesses and the third centre, community benefits such as employment, training, environmental benefits, and use of procurement to promote sustainability and fair work practices. All positive items and all compliant. The second report 3 weeks ago was the annual procurement report 2019-20 to reflect on the year past. 35 pages with a lot of detail. And guess what? Not a question linked to the motion. Councillor, 60 pages of detailed information on 2 important procurement reports and not one question linked to motion. Grandstanding comes to mind, or indeed some sinister plot in procurement. Need to say, councillors, beware. Provost, looking ahead, there will be changes. Brexit will no doubt change things and will have an impact on overall procurement. At that particular time, a full review of our general contract standing orders can be done. But at this point, we see no reason to change them. Provost, I move the amendment.
Councillor McNeill.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, Councillor Burrows has outlined why it's unnecessary to change our procurement arrangements and how they're reported. A few years ago, the procurement policy in North Lanarkshire was described as unsatisfactory and required to be amended, and it has been amended. Thanks to the hard work by the officers, supported by the Audit Commission, NLC has recently been recognised as being in the top performing band for local authority procurement. Officers at committee always state they are happy to provide councillors with further information regarding our procurement policies and procedures. I'm advised they're seldom asked for this information by elected members. As everyone knows, committee papers can often run into hundreds of pages containing in-depth detail of officers' work on behalf of this local authority. I sometimes wonder about motions that come before this council, mostly from SNP councillors, I have to say, and what they aim to achieve. Councillor Burrows may well be correct. It may be a look-at-me mentality from some and their designs on being elsewhere. But then again, maybe I'm being harsh. At least this motion concerns a matter that's within the gift of this council, unlike nuclear weapons, unlike Hong Kong, unlike Catalonia. Provost, I second the motion. The amendment, sorry.
Thank you. Mark, is there anybody indicated they want in?
Yep. Provost, there's 3 speakers indicated they wish to come in. Councillor Tom Johnson, Councillor Linden, Councillor Carricker, and there's another 3 after that if you...
Right. Councillor Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Provost. The thing that catches my eye in this motion from the SNP is that we're calling for details on how many businesses tendering were currently paying the real living wage. Surely we want to know that. Why does the North Lanarkshire Labour Party want to make it difficult for us to find these things out? This tells you everything you need to know about the North Lanarkshire Labour Party when they say, yes, you can find out if you go to offices and inquire about it. We're asking for it on paper. The real living wage, are you paying it or are you not paying it? But the Labour Party don't seem to see that as an issue. Tells you everything you need to know. Thank you.
Councillor Linden.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be very brief. I hadn't intended on coming in on the debate, but as I listened to the contributions by the mover of the amendment and indeed the seconder of the amendment, I became somewhat concerned and felt compelled to contribute to this discussion. I think, first of all, an observation that I would make is, and I've heard, I listen very closely, Councillor Burrows is always very articulate when he outlines his remarks. And I listened very carefully to what he said, and as he went through it, he said that the information that members are looking for, the SNP group are looking for, is already available. My question then would be, if that is the case, and the measures outlined in the motion are in place, then how is the motion competent? Clearly the motion is competent, it appears on the agenda. It would simply be the case that that information, whilst available, is not being disclosed to members through the committee papers, because that is the primary function of the motion today. I then listened to Councillor McNeill's contribution, and notwithstanding, of course, his commentary around the SNP group, and I always appreciate Councillor McNeill's approach to his contributions. They always bring a smile to my face, if nothing else. I must say that I was quite perplexed when he said that he didn't understand the purpose of the motion or what it hopes to achieve. Well, just for Councillor McNeill's benefit and anybody else who wasn't listening carefully to the motion, we're hoping that we can achieve that in addition to the current provision in the papers, we would hope that we would get the details of the scope of the contract, the information on how many companies tendered, the information on all the tenderers' SME status, how many businesses tendered were paying the real living wage, and a brief description of any community benefits. That is the purpose of the motion, and it's actually quite clearly articulated within it. I want to end my brief remarks, Provost, by correcting the record. The most concerning part of Councillor Burrows and Councillor McNeill's contribution was what was said in relation to our motivation for moving the motion. It does deeply concern me when I hear language like, do we think there's a sinister plot in procurement? Or is there a deep mistrust of officers? Let me make abundantly clear to Councillor Burrows, Councillor McNeill, and anybody else who needs to hear it. We have nothing but the utmost respect and thanks for the officers of the council who take the time to bring forward comprehensive reports to committee, and we relish the opportunity to have that dialogue at committee. In asking for additional detail like we have in the motion, that is not to infer or imply anything. And I want to record the thanks of my group for the efforts of officers in ensuring that we are kept fully informed. And I want to also that there is no belief that there's a sinister plot, there's no belief of mistrust, simply a desire that we can exercise our democratic functions of scrutiny and good governance better by ensuring that we have access to the information that we're asking for, and that's exactly what the purpose of the motion is. So I want to end, Provost, by thanking the mover of the motion and the seconder of the motion, and reiterating again our thanks to officers not only in procurement but right across the board who, when appearing at committee, ensure that members are fully informed of the business being transacted. And I look forward to members supporting the motion in order to continue the good governance that we so cherish. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Carragher.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Linden has touched on the point that I want to make. The proposer of the amendment stated that this motion was unnecessary because the information was already available. That to me is saying that it shouldn't have been deemed competent. Clearly it was, which means the information isn't available. I just wondered if you wanted to address his point, because it gets used over and over again with the motions that we bring forward to the council. Thank you.
It's competent because the way the questions were asked within it. Mark, is there any other speakers?
Provost, can I ask a point of order? I'm struggling with this machine. If you put me at the end of the list, don't mind.
Sorry, Provost, there's another Councillor Kelly, Councillor Jai Ashraf, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Branning McVeigh, and I think laterally Councillor Morgan.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to start by saying I think we have to be very clear that I have no doubt we have the most open and transparent procurement service in the whole of Scotland. I have vivid memories I don't want to go into in 2016 when Jim Logue became the leader, alongside myself, deputy leader, the work that was put into procurement in North Lanarkshire Council to make necessary improvements that were required to make it the most honest and transparent procurement service. And it's quite an area I'm quite passionate about in terms of we keep it that way. And part of that is to be independent. And I'll be honest, the service needs to be independent, remain independent. It sits uncomfortable with me today that we're having a discussion around procurement brought by elected members to the full council. I don't think that's appropriate. I think the motion is irrelevant. Everything that's been asked for is provided. I think we all know that. There is no real reason for this motion to come forward. Councillor Burrows has explained the process, has explained what happens with procurement, the openness of the procurement team to answer any questions that are appropriate and always have to be appropriate because of the nature of procurement. So I think this motion is completely irrelevant. Those questions that have been asked and what's been asked for in the motion is already been answered and is continually answered as throughout North Lanarkshire Council and has been and will continue to be. In terms of living wage, I mean, we've made it clear the living wage is a requirement. It's put in procurement, and the living wage is part of it. We're proud of that. We're proud of it as a council with the living wage. So that again is a non-issue. We're absolutely committed to our communities in terms of the nature of what we're doing through procurement. And we actually have some of the largest procurement initiatives happening in the whole of the country, the whole of the UK, that's going to provide thousands of jobs in the future. And I think it's better we allow the staff and service to go on with the job in the open and transparent manner they do, and do it in an independent fashion. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Thank you, Provost. Like some of the speakers before, I wasn't intending on coming onto this debate, but I just find some of the contributions by some of the other Labour colleagues just to be very odd, and it's a strange sort of occurrence that happens quite often. Specifically with Councillor Burrows and just also what Councillor Kelly said there. Perhaps we just approach our role differently. I'm unsure. I don't really know what to put it to, and I don't want to be attaching this to anything. But I mean, specifically on the point that Councillor Kelly just said there about the nature of this motion not being appropriate, and procurement should just be something that just kind of happens, and we shouldn't be involving ourselves within these sort of processes. It's a significant amount of the public's money, that entirely the public's money that we are dealing with, through hundreds of thousands of pounds. And there are some specific committees, I think, which are, I mean, the reason why Councillor Damasio is the one bringing this forward today is because obviously he's he's a lot more read up on this than I am. But I mean, some specific committees where I think there's like a threshold of if it's under £500,000 for a specific service or a specific product or something that we're buying, that it doesn't need to be reported back to the committee, or under £250,000. And maybe relative to how much of the spending that we're spending within the council, that isn't a lot of money. But I think many people in the public would be shocked to learn that if something's being going through a procurement process of under £250,000, so it's £240,000. Like no level of detail or very little level of detail is being brought forward to elected members for us to scrutinise. So unless we're doing what is being said to us by what Councillor Burrows is saying, to go ahead and ask specific questions on these specific transactions and things that went through the procurement processes, they will never be seen by any elected members, any of the 77 elected members, and we will never know any level of detail unless we ask the specific question every single time, singularly, for these details within the council committee groups. And we sit in these committee groups because we look through these papers, and we're here to ensure that everything is running to the best of the ability. And I'm not too sure what this is, inferment or what's being insinuated here about something sinister. I mean, it's literally just so we can do our jobs correctly. And if it was a significant workload, then obviously we would consider that as part of this motion. But Councillor Burrows has already said to us that the small dedicated team that deals with procurement already look into all of this, and he says, why is it even being brought to us here today? I mean, if all this information is already available, all we're saying is, can this information be provided to the councillors that attend these meetings? And we can just obviously look over these details. We're just asking simply for a little more detail so we can do our role slightly better. And I don't think, although we have ultimate trust within our council officers, as Councillor Linden say, and they do an amazing role. However, being told to obviously can they just get on with the job and just do what they're doing? I mean, that is our role. We are elected to be here to obviously run the council, and I feel as if we should be allowed to do our job in the most appropriate manner. And this level of detail is required, I think, in the 21st century from what's expected from us from the public to do our role completely and truly correctly. So I'm supporting the motion, and I would ask that all the other councillors do so as well, because there's literally nothing political about this. We're just asking for a little more information. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thanks, Provost. And I'll be quick. And it's just to pick up on the points raised in relation to procurement and also the living wage. Audit Scotland has confirmed over the years that the council has appropriate arrangements in place to manage risk in procurement and also for key suppliers. And in relation to the living wage, I mean, you can look at the best value reports, because it's something that Audit Scotland picks up time and time again. So I think members should be referred to the best value report and perhaps have a look there for any concerns that they might have in relation to this. But I'm just a little bit concerned that we're actually venturing into the roles of officers instead of actually maintaining the roles as councillors. And surely for councillors, if you do have questions, isn't it best to just raise those questions when we're at committee? I mean, that is the role of a councillor, is to ask questions to get answers. That's all I really want to say, Provost. Thank you.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thank you, Provost. I think ultimately this comes down to, do we agree that delegated powers are appropriate or are they not? At the training in 2018, there was very clear guidance given to councillors regarding their role in procurement, what was appropriate for us to get into and what was not. And I reflect on that regularly. But each of the points reasonably asked, every report that we receive and every committee that we sit upon has an author. That author is there to be asked any question in advance of committee or during committee or at committee as they present the paper. And as I have done myself, I have written a series of questions or a single question to scope information in advance of perhaps asking a more direct question at committee. But each of the items that have been raised by Councillor Damasio reasonably are all items that this council has robust policy on, has got clear scoring and weighting on contracts that are provided. And if we want to see that, I have been to contract openings. In the old days, it was a bunch of envelopes poured onto a table and they were opened simultaneously. Now it's a bit, less exciting. It's a click on a computer screen. because of the framework agreements that we have, but it is still transparent, things are still open timiously and fairly. As an authority, we cherish a living wage approach. We are a living wage employer and we advocate for it. But we don't just advocate for it saying, oh, it's a good idea. We have staff within North Lanarkshire Council whose job it is, as part of their role, is to promote and support our supply chain, our small and medium enterprise businesses across North Lanarkshire to become living wage employers because of a number of the points that Councillor Damasio raised. You don't need to tell us, you're preaching to the converted. We are out advocating and supporting the living wage to a variety of people, and through our supply chain and through our supply chain intermediaries like the Supplier Development Programme and others, we are saying how do we get benefit, employment and opportunity for communities and individuals in North Lanarkshire through the substantial amount of public funds that our authority raise. We have robust provisions. Audit Scotland is there as the safeguarder of our process. We were told we needed to do work. We have done that work. We are robust and we have transformed the processes. So for me, there is nothing sinister here. It's about, do you appreciate delegated authority or do you not? We can see everything, or we can create a threshold. All that we have here is a threshold at committees, and any officer will answer any question. I have never not been answered a question in anything that's robust. So for me, I appreciate the amendment and the clarity that it has brought, and we certainly provide the information that councillors need to make robust decisions. So the question really we have to reflect on here is, how operational is the role of a councillor? And the answer to that is clear, is our role is not operational. Ours is in policy, it's in governance, and that's why we reflect on the reports that we are given. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Provost, and apologies for my rudimentary understanding of these systems. I'll follow through from the mover of the amendment and Bobby Burrows, Ian McNeill, Heather McVeigh and 2 or 3 others that touched on things. But I think it's important that we turn this prism round and ask those that have put this motion here why it's here. If you had not accepted this motion, Provost, you can imagine the furor. You'd have been in the same position as a political party leader that claims they can't remember meetings with previous leaders and things like that. The inference, the implication and so on and so forth. There'd been plenty of smoke there, and it had been given and flung in your face in your direction. So the points I would seek clarification on is the people that have made criticism here of the present system, which is much upgraded compared with previous years. Can they give me one tangible example of a contract that's recently been appointed at a service committee that has not made reference to the living wage, that has not made reference to community benefits, that has not given a comprehensive list of all the contractors that bid for that? If they can give me that, I'm willing for it. Do you know what you do with it? Take it across the road from the Civic Centre. That's the best way. Because otherwise, all you're doing here is stirring up something that doesn't need stirred and giving the wrong impression that there is something in here. See heads nodding already. Already, I've sat here tonight and I've been identified as a supposed socialist by the introductor of this particular motion. I've heard other councillors and other political groups call themselves socialists. So 2 points of clarification to finish with, Provost. Give me an example of the contract you could hold up right now and say that is questionable. And secondly, for clarification, for those people that identify themselves in the SNP as socialists, are you a socialist or a nationalist socialist? Could you clarify those 2 points?
There's a point order being raised by
I
Councillor
expect
Linden.
it to be interrupted.
Councillor Morgan, there's a point order. There's a point
order.
Councillor Morgan, there's a point order been raised.
Provost, I just wondered, in terms of standing orders, whether you consider it appropriate for a member to make reference to potential illicit behaviour or suggest that a member of any group or indeed any councillor is implying that by raising the motion, which is entirely competent, is illicit. I think that's a very dangerous allegation to be making, Provost. I think that it's one that perhaps the member and other members may wish to reflect upon.
I was just about to speak to Councillor Morgan when you come in with your point of order. Councillor Morgan, can we keep to the facts of the motion and the amendment, please? Thank you. Councillor Morgan, you can. Councillor Stubbs, you've come in with a point of order.
Provost, yet again, Councillor Morgan has made reference to a very, I don't think there's a word for it. He's effectively, yet again, how many times is he going to do it, called the SNP members of this council Nazis, and I would ask him to apologise and withdraw that.
Councillor Morgan, could you withdraw that? The statement and the way you put it. Councillor Morgan, your microphone's not on. Councillor Morgan.
Okay.
Right.
Then.
Quite the.
Can I ask Provost why you've allowed them? No.
Tommy, you keep on cutting off. Councillor Morgan, you keep cutting off. We can't hear you. Councillor Morgan, we can't hear you.
Okay, hear me now, Jean? I think for the reasons of consistency, I'll clarify the points again. I asked members if they were nationalists or socialists
Tommy,
or socialists before nationalists.
Let's not
That is not a word. I use no word other than that. I can just say that they should question their own political position before they throw pejorative descriptions at other members.
I'll cut you off if you don't stick to the.
Provost, there's a point of order being raised by Councillor T. Johnston.
Councillor Johnston. Councillor Tom Johnston. Councillor Tom Johnston.
Yes.
He's maybe got a contract he wants to know about.
Tommy, that was not called for.
I'm concerned that the language being used by Councillor Morgan here against SNP members, he's done this before. I think he's trying to say that some of us are national socialists. Is that correct? And what does he mean?
Councillor Johnston, I've already asked him to retract that statement. If he's not retracting it, he won't be back in.
Provost, if it's not retracted, I would ask you to remove him from the meeting.
Provost, what word is it I am using? I have asked people to identify themselves if they are nationalists or socialists or nationalists. I've used no other word. Why am I being asked to remove a word that people should be proud to identify themselves as, a nationalist or a socialist?
Andrew, I think the Provost's having connectivity issues.
Yes. I can see, Provost, are you back? Bear with me.
Maybe Councillor Castle's time to shine.
Can we stop having one member telling us what to do here?
Absolutely, he wants to chair the meeting as well.
Councillor Castles, would you care to take the chair in the absence of the Provost, who's obviously having connection problems?
Okay, I'll continue.
Well,
okay. I will continue with what the Provost said. Councillor Morgan, I think the language can be interpreted several ways and it can be deemed as offensive. I would like you to not to use the term again, and if possible, to withdraw the remark, because it is open to interpretation and I can see that and I can understand it could be offensive. So I would ask you if you would withdraw the remark and certainly not use it again. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Morgan, I'll move to the next speaker then. You still have the opportunity to come back in, and I do think you should withdraw the remark. I'll move on. Andrew, sorry, Mark, could you keep me right as to who the next speaker is?
There's been a point order raised, apologies, Deputy Provost, by Councillor Weir, and there's a point order been raised by Councillor Stubbs.
Okay, I'll hear the points.
Hi, can I just say...
Look away.
Could everyone mute them away, because I'm getting a lot of background noise. Thank you. Councillor Weir, you need to unmute your microphone now. I've still got a red light. You have to unmute there.
Sorry, it's this headset. This meeting's being recorded. Is it possible to play it back and see? Because he did say National Socialist, and he needs to apologise or be removed from the council.
Not at this time, and I can only deal with it. Not at this time, and I can only deal with it as I have suggested. Councillor Stubbs, point of order, please.
Yeah.
Deputy Provost, you've just made a request to Councillor Morgan to withdraw and apologise for the remark, and he's refused to do so. The next logical step is for you to have him removed from the meeting.
I'm amazed the amount of provosts that's there, or deputy provost. Provost, I never used any word other than nationalist or socialist.
Councillor Morgan, I've asked you not to use the term, and we will continue with the debate. I'm not going to allow you to continue to take further part in this conversation. We'll move on to the next speaker, who is, Mark, could you keep me right on this?
Yeah, Deputy Provost, I think there's two more speakers to come in, Councillors Graham and I think Councillor Hume has come in latterly.
Okay, I'm only going to take those two speakers, Councillor Graham and Councillor Hume, then we'll move to the summons up. Councillor Graham first, then Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would just like to emphasise the point that Paul Kelly made earlier. When Jim Logue took over in 2016, we changed the administration completely. We introduced perestroika, glasnost across all services. I can assure colleagues, procurement was looked at thoroughly and made as transparent as humanly possible. And it's led and managed very ably and competently by Graham Proudfoot. So I can assure colleagues the process is totally transparent. Thank you.
Apologies, I forgot to switch my microphone off. This is summing up. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Really, the motion is being used to have another dig at the SNP. There was no criticism whatsoever in the motion of officers or the procurement process itself. The procurement process, as Alan just said, was modernised thoroughly. It now follows modern standards and is represented within all the reports. What we are asking for is information that the people that have been speaking said is readily available. If it's readily available, let's put it in the reports, because the reports are on Mars, they're available to constituents, and if the constituents are interested in following that level of detail within procurement, I harp on constantly about efficiency within the council. It's a much more efficient way of doing it to have it in the reports to be read and understood than for officers to receive interminable questions from members to elaborate on any contract that is in a report. To get the information that's already there, it would be much more efficient to get it into the reports, both for councillors and for anyone that's interested in a particular contract, from our constituents to see the information that is readily available. So I've absolutely no idea why anyone would object to this motion. It's lack of being critical and it's requesting information that's readily available for members and for constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. We move on to the summings up. Will be Councillor Burrows first, followed by Councillor Damasio. Could I ask you or remind you that would you please not introduce any new business? And I know it's been a bit of a touchy debate. Could we try and stick to the points in the debate? And as I said again, please try and, there have been a lot of areas covered, but please try and avoid introducing new business. Councillor Burrows, it's over to you.
Thanks, Provost. Another different type of discussion, I need to say. I'll say it that way. I think Heather made it clear, and she's right, it's about delegated authority. We need to be careful as councillors that we are not officers, we're not operational. We're there in a role, and that's important. I think Councillor Jordan Linden, you spoke about the staff and the quality of staff, and you're right, you're absolutely right. But I need to say the procurement team's a very small team. They feel, I need to say, that there's things different. They genuinely do. But to sum up, I need to say that we've got an open door approach for any councillor to speak to the procurement team. And there has been massive changes, as Councillor Graham said. We're open, we're transparent, and we're one of the best. And Scotland, and Audit Scotland backs that up. We have a very small dedicated team. You'd be surprised at the number that's there, but they deliver a quality product service and have done. They've now been recognised for their efforts. And as I said in my remarks, they're in the top quartile of councils. I think the important part of what, for me, when I was bringing the amendment, is that we had the chance for big debate at the Finance and Resource Committee procurement strategy motions in September. Two big reports, all agreed without debate. So that tells me, it should tell everybody else, that the strategy report there 3 weeks ago, people were happy with the strategy. People were happy. But one thing I do say, it will change. Brexit, we know how far away Brexit is, and we don't know what it's going to be like. But there's no doubt Brexit will influence the procurement in the future. Now, at that time, if we look at the strategy, when we can look at some other items with it. But at this time, I don't believe that we feel that there are no changes required at this time. So I'll move the amendment, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. I now move to Councillor Damasio to continue with finish with the summing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. As suspected, to me, it seems like Labour just want to block for blocking's sake. This motion is entirely uncontroversial. Why are the Labour group so sore about this subject? You know, you're going back over old history yourself. I'm not broaching that subject. You brought that up. We're not questioning officers here. This motion is simply about reporting on contracts under the threshold. Just very minor detail, which, as a number of members have mentioned, the information is there, the information is provided at the procurement stage. It just needs lifted and included within the report. Very, very simple. I acknowledge that North Lanarkshire last PCIP assessment showed considerable improvement, as has been mentioned. Less members are unaware. I sit in Scotland Excel. I'm vice convener. I'm well aware that Scotland Excel also worked very closely with the council to support that vast improvement. And the procurement team should be congratulated for their progress. We're not saying any different. We're actually, you know, very supportive of the procurement team also. It's about providing information and just being transparent. As others have mentioned, it's simply about picking up the information, the good work that you know, you know, Megan and others have mentioned in terms of Audit Scotland. All that good work should be reported back to councillors on an ongoing basis. It should be transparent, as I say, within the reports. In terms of Brexit, I had my breakfast a while ago. In terms of Brexit being only months away, now's the time to ensure our procurement decisions have been even more robust ahead of our EU departure. Locally, North Lanarkshire, indeed Scottish businesses, all Scottish businesses face great risk from Brexit. With Council, we need to immediately enhance our scrutiny of contracts awarded and ensure that SMEs are supported. Businesses do not use Brexit to reduce workers' pay and conditions. Contracts awarded, benefit local communities. It's important that we can see that in action within those reports that are coming back. Brexit brings so much uncertainty, it would be wrong to wait until the chaos unfolds. We have a short window now to make these relatively simple changes to our reporting. These changes will demonstrate to North Lanarkshire businesses and constituents we are serious about protecting local employment ahead of a time of great uncertainty. The relatively small amount of additional reporting administration will be outweighed by the benefits of showing that transparency that will flow from this motion. In terms of some of the other comments that were mentioned, yes, I'm bringing this up again. I brought this up a year ago, and he's put an amendment up against it then. Thankfully you accepted some of my points, which went through for those above the threshold. And someone mentioned grandstanding, really. Grandstanding when asking for minor oversight in terms of reporting back to committee. Disrespect to officers, a few of the Labour members mentioned. Nothing could be further from the truth. This motion does not refer to issues within the processes of North Lanarkshire Council. I know I'm repeating myself here, but we heard that ad nauseum, quite frankly, from Labour members. As if this motion is questioning the officers in the procurement team. It's absolutely not the case. I would encourage the Labour members to withdraw the motion, withdraw their amendment, I should say, and back the motion. Quite frankly, to do anything else would be absurd. So I encourage members to back the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We now move to the vote. Andrew, I'll hand over to you to carry out the vote.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We have a motion by Councillor Damasio and an amendment by Councillor Burrows. If you can indicate how you wish to vote, please. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Danish Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Junaid Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barclay.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge. Councillor Beveridge. I think you might have left the call. Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Amendment.
Thank Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor Burrows.
Amendment.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Carragher.
Motion.
Councillor Carson. Councillor Carson.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Castles.
Amendment.
Councillor Michael Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Cullen.
Amendment.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Amendment.
Councillor Curry. Councillor Curry. Councillor Damasio.
Motion.
Councillor Doherty. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Sorry, Councillor Doolan, did you say motion?
Motion, Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Amendment.
Councillor Fannin.
Amendment.
Councillor Farouk.
Motion.
Councillor Feeney.
Motion.
Councillor Fisher.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Gourley.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Hogg.
Andrew, can I just interrupt you there? We've got a point of order being raised. Apologies. It's Councillor Goldie.
Sorry, Councillor Goldie, could you raise your point of order?
Yeah, there's someone whispering amendment every time someone's mic is open. I don't know whether it's trying to influence the vote or what the reason is, but it just keeps coming. And it's happened 2 or 3 times during votes today that they've been voting on behalf of everybody else.
Right, okay, thank you, Councillor Goldie. Could you all ensure, unless you're speaking, I do tend to hear what sounds like a gale force wind through these headphones on occasion, so if you could please make sure that there are no unintended background noises. Thank you. So please everyone, unless you're voting, would you please make sure your mic is switched off? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg, I think...
Sorry, Andrew, before you continue, Councillor Sophia Coyle has clarified that she was voting for the motion, not the amendment.
Councillor Sophia Coyle, you wish to change your vote, is that correct?
Yes, please. Sorry about that. This internet connection has kicked me off and then come back on. So I'm taking medication there, so it's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg is next, but I think he may no longer be on the call. Councillor Hume. Councillor Hume? No, Councillor...
Yeah, I said motion, Andrew.
Oh, apologies, I didn't hear you there. Councillor Catherine Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Tom Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Jones.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Councillor Larson.
Oh, motion, Andrew, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Lennon.
Motion.
Councillor Linden.
Motion, please, Andrew.
Councillor Logue.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McGowan.
Motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Amendment.
Councillor McKendrick's not on the call. Councillor McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNally.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeil. Councillor McNeil.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor McPake.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh.
Amendment.
Councillor Mooney.
Amendment.
Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morgan. Councillor O'Rourke.
Sorry.
Amendment.
Amendment.
So is that you, Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Buzz.
Councillor Morgan, amendment. Councillor Pettigrew.
Motion.
Councillor Quigley.
Amendment.
Councillor Redding.
Amendment.
Councillor Rorty.
Amendment.
Councillor Shevlin.
Amendment.
Councillor Shields.
Amendment.
Councillor Stephen.
Motion.
Councillor Stevenson.
Amendment.
Councillor Stocks.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Alan Valentine. Councillor Alan Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Annette Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Weir.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Woods.
Amendment.
Thank you. The amendment has received 37 votes, the motion 31 with no abstentions, so the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I don't know if the Provost is back online again. If not,
I'm back online.
okay, I'll
This
hand
is
back
the
over to you.
13 I know This is the third day in a row. Get top in and get it reconfigured. Agenda item 10 is a notice of motion for Councillor Lennon and Councillor Doolan. There's no amendment indicated to the motion. Do you still wish to speak?
Yes,
Councillor Lennon.
yes, if possible, Provost. So, Provost, thank you for providing the opportunity to speak on this motion today. To simplify the motion, Councillor Doolan will speak on the Moodiesburn element of things and I, Gartcosh. Provost, Gartcosh has been at the centre of a community growth area which was first identified in the Glasgow and Clyde Valley Plan in 2006. The structured plan suggested a requirement for 3,000 new dwellings for the Gartcosh Glenboy community growth area, and the finalised North Lanarkshire local plan identified suitable sites. The CGA would include not only housing but other facilities which should support new and existing populations such as shops, schools, leisure facilities and open space. Many could argue when Gartcosh became strained, was it the first new housing projects that went up in the 90s to 2000s? Was it further builds around the village for 2006 to 12? Or the current housing completed for 2017 and currently under construction? More importantly, Provost, does it matter? What is important is that residents, new and old, have the right to live in a sustainable community which ties with North Lanarkshire's ambition of being an attractive destination for residents to live, learn, work, invest and visit. The Community Growth Area project was to deliver a master plan for housing, including a new school infrastructure, services and amenities. It was put forward and sold as an environmental project with the conclusion of the 7 locks, with Gartcosh having a walkway around the whole lock, a gateway centre, picnic areas, observation areas for wildlife and the creation of green space cycle walkways with discrete housing. On that note, Provost, I must add at this point that I welcome and look forward to Gartcosh getting a proportional amount of the 7.4 million given by the lottery to spend in each of the 7 locks to the level described in the 7 locks master plan. And I have no doubt that this will improve not only health within the village but also well-being. Fast forward to the 90s and North Lanarkshire Council policy and strategies have moved on, so residents have to look at what is current today. It's only right that the community embrace North Lanarkshire Council's policy and strategy in its proposal for community hubs. It's the community's right under the Community Empowered Scotland Act 2015 to plan and have a say in what happens within their own community. Within this motion it states population size, which Moodiesburn currently meets, with Gartcosh accelerating in growth simultaneously, however many years away for reaching the stated figure. The classification for a small town states a population size of 3,500, which Gartcosh currently meets. At present, Gartcosh has 1,484 houses within the village and surrounds, with consented planning permission granted under the community growth strategy for a further 1,842, taking the total homes to 3,328. Not in the too distant future, and something that significantly is larger than the original 3,000 planned. The exponential growth needs foresight by ensuring appropriate services and infrastructure prior to the completion of the developers. Members of North Lanarkshire Council approved the plan for North Lanarkshire at Policy and Strategy Committee, a plan-based strategy which strategically outlines a clear future direction for North Lanarkshire. The plan aims to provide a substantial economic, social and environmental benefit for North Lanarkshire's communities, homes and individuals. Within the strategy, there are elements which clearly impact Gartcosh. The plan is designed to be implemented over 10 years. The implementation of the Community Investment Fund, which currently sits at 694 million, the General Fund Capital Programme of 329 million, Glasgow City Region City investment of 182 million, 6.4 million specific to Gartcosh for road and rail infrastructure. This place-based investment method is to support ambitious plans that NLC has for community regeneration and community hubs, schools, new build programme and parks and master planning. As members will know, this means North Lanarkshire Council no longer builds standalone schools, but looks to create community hubs. Simply, this means placing elements such as school infrastructure, amenities, health services, commercial operations grouped together at one location on campus, which is what Gartcosh has been waiting for since the early 90s. The Northern Corridor as a whole currently has over 25,000 a population and no health centre. In fact, Gartcosh has no primary healthcare facilities whatsoever, and this motion aims to incorporate this provision into any future planning. I have no doubt the integration of assets within community hubs can serve communities in an efficient and effective manner and respond to changing community needs over time. It is no secret that the residents of Gartcosh are the largest stakeholders and the community residents will have to live with the results. Therefore, this motion in status seeks to cement communities' views, enabling the Gartcosh community to clarify and define a range of assets and services from the community's perspective in which they require. Gartcosh residents have set out guiding principles in line with North Lanarkshire Council's own recommendations to develop and create a community hub campus. And as we speak, community organisations are getting ready to comprehensively survey Gartcosh, and so the survey will reflect those principles and provide evidence of community support. The guiding principles. Is that me?
That's time up.
Right. Just thanks.
Councillor Doolan now.
In seconding this motion, Provost, can I be absolutely clear right from the outset of my contribution that the contents of the motion now before us are in no way intended to be presented as being confrontational. And rather than being confrontational, I'm hopeful that the motion will stimulate a healthy debate, taking into account the growing concerns of my constituents. Provost, while I'm aware of the time restrictions placed upon us, I remain hopeful that within the timeline, we are able to highlight the growing concerns of both Gartcosh and Moodiesburn villages. Provost, many years ago, I was born into the mining community of Moodiesburn, a community that was soon to bear the horrendous heartache of Auchengeek pit disaster in 1959, claiming the lives of 47 miners. Moodiesburn back then was widely recognised as being a timely hamlet, consisting of just over 200 homes. However, in the early 60s, Moodiesburn began to grow with the much welcome construction of new council-owned homes. Since those earlier years of the 1960s, the people of Moodiesburn began to witness an extensive growth within our village's population due to the integration of private housing developments. Today, our population is estimated to be standing between 8,000 and 9,000 people. However, serious concerns have arisen over recent years in relation to the existing village infrastructure, which was designed to serve the needs of a small rural village back in the 60s. Today, Moodiesburn is often referred to as being one of Scotland's largest villages, within easy motorway access to towns such as Glasgow and Edinburgh. Back in 2012, it was estimated that our village hosted approximately 3,000 homes, and since 2012, we have witnessed approval after approval for more private housing development. Sadly, though, we still see no attempt made by NLC to enhance a vastly outdated infrastructure. And despite this surge in local protestation, we still have those very same shops and those very same services to serve a community that has grown immensely and is now verging on a small town status. Which is why I want to make an impassioned plea here to our colleagues who sit in the planning committee here in North Lanarkshire to give careful consideration and thought to any future planning applications applicable to the Northern Corridor area. I ask you please not to turn your back on the legitimate concerns of those we are elected to represent, to continue with these proposals and at the same time dismissing local opinion. Today, Provost, I echo the thoughts of my home community, who are loudly shouting that the community has left behind, that their community has been starved of real investments, while others continue to flourish. The village of Moodiesburn have simply had enough and are now demanding that significant investment is provided. I listen with bated breath as we're always reminded of this great ideology, how good it is to listen to those we represent when formulating council policies. I deliver my comments today knowing that I comfortably have the full support I have of those living in my home community. Thank you. I proudly second the motion.
The motion's unopposed, so it goes through unanimously. The item is questions received in terms of standing orders number 51. There was 2 questions received. These were circulated today along with the answers to the questions. Is everybody happy to take them as read? Thank you very much for your attendance. Can I thank Andrew, Mark and Claire Louise, who's been working behind the scenes, and Irene, who's been working behind the scenes for their support today.
Thanks to you and the officers.
Thank you, Provost.
Well, thank you, Chair.
Thanks to the Chair.
Thank the Chair and all the officers.